day. That's a couple minutes early. All right, everybody welcome. This is the council's chance now to look in some detail at the budget. We've had a couple of presentations by staff in different scenarios. We have a book. We have a team here that's going to be making this presentation to us today, and I appreciate all the compliments here, the teamwork you have in putting this together and the effort you've made to prepare for today. So we'll go into this discussion. I think probably each of us in the council have one area or another that we either have been concentrating on through emails with you or may want to raise today. That's fine, that's expected, that's what we're here to do. And at the end of the day, or at the end of tomorrow at the latest, we'll come up with a final plan. I would suggest once I turn this over to our team that at some point between now and noon we'll have at least one break. And we'll just sort of decide when that seems like the best thing to do. But I do appreciate, and I'm sure speaking for the council here, the effort that's gone in to prepare this, and we look forward to questions and answers and moving forward to make decisions today. With that, I would like to ask the village manager if he has any traveling music comments for us to move along. Otherwise,
it's Dana is going to take the lead this morning. So.
Okay.
All right.
Before we go any further, however, there's at least one introduction you could please make.
Yeah, thank you, John. So, as you all can see, there's a new face in the room behind us. Carter Robertson is joining us. He is in the joining us from the Carolina MPA program for the internship program that's associated with that degree, and he's joining us as the performance analyst internship. So he'll be here. You'll be seeing his face around at meetings, around Village Hall, etc. Probably through about early to mid-August. So we're excited to have him. We're going to put him to work. He's already day 3 now, and he's hard at work already on some projects for us. So we're happy to have him. So thanks for being here.
Well, glad to be here.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. We are going to discuss our FY24 SOP in more detail. There will be some things that we'll cover that we have already presented and discussed with you, but since this is a public meeting and it's being recorded for the public, we want to make sure that for those that are viewing it, maybe and hearing about it for the first time, kind of have the complete picture. This absolutely was a team effort to pull this together among the managers. Matt, Sheila Edmonds in Financial Services is absolutely instrumental and critical in preparing this for you. We have gone through many iterations, scenarios, considered a lot of data, a lot of options in what we have selected to present as our proposal for the FY24 budget and strategic operating plan. So we will go through the scenarios, the additional 5-year forecast scenarios that were presented when we get to the 5-year forecast section. I think it will be helpful if we go through the 24 budget in detail that we've proposed along with the proposed 5-year forecast first, so you understand that baseline of what we're proposing before we look at the impact of some of those scenarios. So Matt's going to get us started with the strategic priorities.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan. Also, I think I drew the short straw this morning. I have a very nice squeaky chair, so I apologize in advance for what you're going to be hearing throughout this meeting. So as Dana said, what we're going to start with is, again, setting the table, what you've all already heard, but for the purposes of the recording and for people who will be watching this at home, kind of letting them know, if this is their first time, where we started from and where we're currently at. And then we'll get into the details with the general fund and et cetera moving forward. So with that, I'm going to direct you all to look within your books on certain pages. So if you can, flip to the strategic priorities section, which should take you to page 41. And so here, this section, for yourselves and for anyone who would like to pull this up online and read at their leisure, is the beginning of what the balanced scorecard looks like for 2024. And again, the balanced scorecard is that is a framework in which we use to help guide us in our goal making and our strategic objectives for the year. For 2024, we did have one small shift within one of our goals, the goal language for goal number 2 under customer. It now says to promote high quality neighborhoods, development, and appearance, whereas last year it was promote high quality development and appearance. So we added neighborhoods in there during our strategic planning retreat in December. On page 43, this is just a reminder. You can see the arrows about where we've been. The pre-retreat meetings start every year in November with the senior leaders pre-retreat meetings, and then we bring you all, the council members, in at the beginning of December for your pre-retreat meeting in preparation for the 2-day retreat in mid-December. And then through there, we've looked at identifying our areas of focus, our balanced scorecard KPIs, et cetera, that brought to you in January. And now, skipping ahead, this is the time in which we are actually we're presenting and having these conversations for you around the budget, with hopeful implementation, hopeful approval in June, and then implementation starting July 1st. One thing I did, we'll get to that in a second here as well. Starting on page 46 of the book, this is our FY24 balanced scorecard that was approved in January. So the 3 areas in red are our areas of focus, and these are those specific areas that you all as council have informed us during the strategic planning process to really put extra focus on for FY24. Those 3 are to develop codes and ordinances to protect the character of village neighborhoods. This is an updated strategic objective, again from FY23. The second one is to support the business community, and the third one is to provide a safe and effective multimodal transportation system. Again, full details here are available in front of you. This is all information though that you have seen over the past few months.
Question.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for this very impressive document, and I know this took a lot of time. I've seen these in my other career. These are not done over the weekend. And so when I always receive a document like this from staff, I would make a point of honoring them by going over it page by page. So I do have a bunch of cats and dogs questions or comments throughout. If you want to hold them, or if it's better for me page by page, I'd be glad to do that. I think some of them are very easy, and
sure.
And you can say the big things for when we go into a more bigger discussion, but I'd be curious also if any of my colleagues have any particular comments and anything I want to raise. The first thing is page 46 and 47, and this is, I've raised this before. Again, we may have a lot of first-time listeners who don't know about this book and don't appreciate all the data here. And this is generally my big question on the balanced scorecard approach, is these, where we have the actual results from one fiscal year, and then we put our targets for later years. And in 20 of these categories, our target for later years is below what we've actually achieved in the previous year, or what we're estimating we'll achieve in the current year. And I know I've said this before, and I said it in previous positions. I think it's counterintuitive from a goal-setting standpoint to do that. Now, I understand there's the balanced scorecard mechanics of things, but I just think when we are achieving 100% of the residents satisfied with our fire services, which is something we can be proud of, that we should look down the road 6 years and say our goal is 95%. And so maybe just for the sake of a quick discussion, clarify why we do that.
Absolutely. So there are a couple reasons for that. So we both look at goals and projections. So our projections may be at 100% or 98%. But our goals for those questions dealing with satisfaction ratings tend to be at around 95% if we are at 95% or higher, right? The rationale for that is that there is a plus or minus margin of error that's involved in every survey, And for us, these residential surveys are around 3.4, 3.5%. So we build in a little bit of that variation within our goal within the customer satisfaction. Now, to your point, Pat, we are showing the goal here, not the projections. If I were to guess, for instance, dealing with fire services, our projections are higher than the 95%. But what we're saying here is that if we see 95%, then we know that we are going to feel that we have at least met the goal because we know that variation exists.
Yeah. It's the same as plan versus actual, in the very simplest sense. We're putting actual here where we know it. It's
I understand.
You have to bracket there.
Yeah, but in the same breath, we have 10 areas where we've actually increased our goal. So there's not a set pattern that everything is going to be an increase of 5% or a decrease of 5%. You can look at, I'll just pick them at random. Some of the ones that decrease, where we have 100 or 99%, we drop it to 85% in one category, 1.3 from 99%. But on the other hand, we will take certain ones and we'll increase them. We're projecting in percentage of residents satisfied with availability of walkways that we're actually at 69%. It's not projecting that, we're actually at 69%. But our projection long-term is the goal is 75%, which seems to me like a rational goal, though it's an area I don't have expertise in. And when the numbers are flipped, again, I pointed out because I find it counterintuitive, and I think most citizens would. And so I think it's good that you're explaining it, but again, it's a disconnect.
Last time you brought this up, last year, I responded also. I'm going to say the same thing here. The balanced scorecard is an administrative tool.
Yes.
And the intent of that is to be able to keep a variety of different topics for a complex organization to monitor them. Okay. And so you establish the goals, okay,
right,
which is a human factor, okay, based on previous data, and you identify as to what you think is going to be an appropriate target to meet for that specific area. And the reason you're doing it is because if you don't achieve the goal, it's not like all the flares go off and emergencies are created. It's what it is, like, okay, I think we need to dive into that a little bit closer and look at it. Because then if there's a good reason that we achieved 93% versus 95% or whatever it is, because of some variation that occurred and we can explain it when we're reacting to it, then we use the tool as is appropriate. This is not a Bible. This is simply an administrative tool to help us guide as to where we're going. And that's how I've used these frequently in the past. And so I don't think it is a disconnect having the variations in there. I think what it is, if we are looking at a specific item, choose on to support the business community, and we're going across in 3.2, and we're looking at, okay, the goal is at 90%, and we look at the back data and say, you know something, we're probably better off doing about 90%, 92% as our goal, because that would be a better indicator that there may be a problem. It's a human factor that's doing it. But again, it's an administrative tool, not something that's the Bible.
And that's how I view it, as a tool, but I also view it for folks as a bit of a view, a stretch, a vision to the future. And the one you cited, the actual result was 89, and we're looking down 6 years, and we're increasing it to 90%. And that makes perfect sense I think to me. But the ones where we were at 100 and then we say, well, we're going to be, our goal is 95%. I think when we discussed this last time, I used the example of the team that won a championship one year, and their goal for the next year is just to have a winning record. And I think, you want to repeat if you can, though that's tough. So that might be the stretch goal as opposed to just, so anyway.
And a stretch goal is different than goals that we have here, okay?
Yes.
They're very clearly different tools.
Yes.
Okay.
And I think there's one other aspect here. And of course, these goals are what we established in our retreat in December.
Right.
But the other part of this is, as I see it, is that the ability to make your final goal 100%, say, has a cost to it in terms of additional staff, additional money spent, whatever. And it may be that the most reasonable expectation and the appropriate expectation for some of these goals is 90%, 95%.
I'm not objecting to the number that the goals are
Okay.
set. I'm objecting or raising concerns about the comparison. We have twice as many goals that we have reduced what our long-term goal is, as we have ones that we've increased. So we're making a distinction between some of these. We're saying these 10, we're going to increase our long-term goal from what we actually achieved in 2022. And then we're saying these 20, we're going to reduce it.
So another way this may be helpful for the people who will be listening to this at home as well is that we also have a ceiling that exists when it comes to these. So setting a goal at 100% as an example means there is only one opportunity. We're either going to meet that goal of 100% or we're going to be below the goal.
I agree with that.
And so this 95% does provide.
I agree with that.
That
No
clarity.
hundreds. I'm not advocating for
Yes.
hundreds.
But the higher we get up within that, the less variability and the more we have to ask ourselves, are we concerned by being below a certain threshold? And right now what we're saying is that the goal being at 95%, if we see 95%, we believe that we are still achieving the goal of providing effective fire services, for an example. But again, our projections, if I remember off the top of my head, our projections are going to still be 99% or so, because that's what history has shown us that exists.
I appreciate the discussion. I'm fine. Thank you.
May I step back and just make one comment? When you look over at the process at page 42 and 43, all of this is a process. And it's a systematic process that we've been using since 2012. And one thing that's missing in here that we had several years ago is when we started this, we have found so many efficiencies by using this process. And the one thing that especially comes to mind is we've lowered our full-time equivalents since we started this, correct? I think we saw, before we started using Baldridge, once we put Baldridge in place, I recall that our FTEs started coming down because we're more efficient.
No, not recently. I think you're right initially.
Initially.
There seemed to be some efficiencies from that.
There
right.
were, and
But
my
now we're
point is,
growing, so-
by using this process that started in 2012, we have developed efficiencies by using this process. And this is a part of the process that we approved in January, and it seems like if we want to make significant changes to this, next January is where the council will do that, because this is a part of the process that happens in January.
I'm not advocating we make a change here, and I like the process. Okay, I just have a question with a part of the formula that I use.
Let's go on.
Thank you.
Let's go on. Thanks, Ben.
And until Lydia, bring back on the previous pages, it may be helpful. This entire section here, again, I'm highlighting a couple areas. Again, if you have questions, I'm happy to dive deeper into it. But for the general public listening as well, the full strategic planning process starts on page 41 until page 72, and that really does outline all the areas and how council has helped us to give us direction into the FY24 through 28 strategic operating plan.
Hey, Matt,
Yes, ma'am.
should we be thinking about adding a line in the transportation block to address the Metropolitan Planning Organization? That's new since we did the...
We did include that as an IAP on the next page.
Right,
Yes.
that's not in here.
Do we have a key
I
point?
don't know that that would be a goal, an objective though.
Okay.
You're talking about adding an objective.
Adding a line to just include it, since it is a temporary thing on one level, because there's going to be a certain amount of work to set it up. That's going to be, a job of work, after which it will probably rattle along on its own, but, I don't know.
I would say that, the IAP area is probably an appropriate place for it on the balanced scorecard. I think that's a tool to improve some of these strategic objectives, like creating a multimodal transportation plan and maintain high quality streets.
I agree with that. But I mean, I will take that note as well. If there's an opportunity that we see come up through that, then we can definitely address that. So as Doug foreshadowed on the next page, on page 48, through this work, we have identified essentially 7 IAPs over the 24 through 28 time period. Just as we said before, the areas of focus are in red, so those initiative action plan items, which are those large-scale, resource-intensive, multi-departmental, multi-year type projects. Those are also in red if they align to an area of focus. So I'll just quickly go over what those are in this form. And again, if we have questions, happy to address them. And as Dana mentioned, we'll go through the scenarios that you all have requested a little bit later on. So under deliver effective fire and rescue services, we have the design, build, staff, and equip Fire Station 93. This was in the last year for fiscal year 28, $0 funded in 24, but $400,000 for the development for the plan in FY28. So the actual build would be in the out years, but this is actually for the design. Then under develop codes and ordinances to protect the character of village neighborhoods, we have the update to the Pinehurst development ordinances. This shows currently fiscal year 24. We know, and this will be updated in the final version, it's actually going to be from 24 through 26. We know that it's now updating it. It's going to take a lot of time, energy, and effort, so we're going to we've given ourselves a couple more years on there. It has $0 funding, but that's because it was funded in previous years, and we're just rolling it over. And I believe that's $200,000 that was rolled over. The next one is under the support the business community strategic objective, which is the relocation of the public services complex to allow for redevelopment of Village Place. 24 through 28 time span. We're looking at $80,000. That's for the site plan and 24, but with a total build of just under $6 million, 24 through 28. And I believe this includes that $500,000, the placeholder in 28 for the sale of property as well. Yeah. Then under provide a safe and effective multimodal transportation system, we have 2 initiative action plan items. The first one is, as Jane just mentioned, dealing with the, sorry, I skipped ahead on that one. The first one is dealing with the consolidated multimodal transportation plan, again 24 through 28. That's because the implementation is going to take some time. The actual development, as you can see, we have $100,000 funding in FY24, and that's the only funding 24 through 28, but the implementation is going to take a few years. And then now the Metropolitan Planning Organization, this one's going to be updated. We have new language. Instead of it saying with assistance from regional partners, it's going to say in association with regional partners. We felt that was a better verbiage for what we're actually trying to achieve there. Again, 24 through 28, $15,000 a year, for a total of $75,000, 24 through 28. Then under Goal 6, under Provide Recreation Programs and Facilities, we have the retrofitting current athletic fields with synthetic turf. You're going to see this a couple of different ways within the book. It's currently 24 through 28. For that negative $27,700, really what that's saying is that there's no action that's actually being taken in FY24 around retrofitting. The next retrofitting, which is either going to be the Cannon Park Field 2 or Wicker Park, would actually be scheduled for FY25. But this is the estimated cost savings of what the new field will bring in, both in saved maintenance cost as well as the ability to activate that field for more usage, turn it over faster, etc. So that's why you set that money slated there as a negative number. Those are the estimated cost savings associated with it. As you can see, the total is just about 1.5 million in FY24 through 28. Again, that's with the other 2 fields budgeted in the out years. All right, 6 and 8. And then finally, under Provide Library and Archive Services, we have to the Expand and Renovate Given Memorial Library and Tufts Archives. This one's going to have a slight update as well. It's currently showing 25 through 28, but because of the conversations that we have had, we're actually going to show this one being from FY24 through 28, because we're actually going to be working on identifying a site location, identifying that type of work now with the with guidance from council saying to look for a new location for the library. So there is going to be work in 24 now for that. The adjustment, there's not going to be an adjustment on the FY24 funding, but the total FY24 through 28 is going to be just under $6 million.
Question on the, in the budget highlights section, we're using the figure 5 million projected budget. And is that, what's the additional 8?
Could you,
Which page?
Page 160?
160.
Under, in the capital
On the
project
capital
fund
project.
summary.
Yep. So the additional 8 million are the.
800,000.
800,000.
Or sorry, 800,000, are the added operating costs for additional staff and, you know, utilities, et cetera, for a new building in 26 through 28.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there is a section in the 5-year, the capital improvement plan, when we get back to there, there's some tables on the library project that show the, those additional operating costs as well as the capital funding.
Let's see when we get to it. And the reason we don't put any dollars in the 24 account is because we're going to spend money.
Yeah, we already budgeted the design money in 23.
Yeah, so there's no 24 funding.
Oh, that's the money that we're
Right, we already
putting
have
over.
1.4
Ah, fine.
million in the
I
capital
remember.
project
I
fund,
remember
so.
the transfer now.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Can I ask one thing? Maybe now's not the right time to ask it, but on the stormwater management, sort of where are we? And you know that House Bill 600, which is going to make restrictions on how much stormwater management can be required and all that kind of crazy thing if it goes through. Is that impacting our new stormwater management plan? And so where are we with everything?
I'm a little flat-footed. I don't know that we've been tracking House Bill 600.
Is that the exact number, Jane?
Yeah.
And that's through stormwater restrictions, no doubt.
It's none of the legislative bills that I've been tracking.
Municipalities and counties could
Right.
do. So we would,
So I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay.
But with regard to where we are, I think
House Bill
You should
600 is a
expect to see-
hodgepodge, and it starts out with animal shelters and stuff like that. But if you scroll down far enough, you come up with stormwater and vegetative buffers and yada, yada, yada. So, but anyway, but where are we with, I don't see, there's no money in here for our stormwater stuff, so.
well, there is. I think you should expect to see the final recommendations for phase 2 of the stormwater master plan early this summer. And there is money in the plan for implementation.
Already,
But right now, it looks like it's at $460,000 a year
okay,
to be put toward future identified priorities. Those priorities will now be informed by this plan.
right. Okay,
Does that help?
yeah, thank you.
Okay.
I think what is suggested there, Jane, isn't it, that we may be having a very well thought out plan, but we may be unable to do certain things in that plan, depending on what this HB
Well, it
600.
Could be, yeah.
Seems to me it's not nice to fool Mother Nature.
Yes, I agree.
We've had, you know, in past years, a lot of flooding and misery caused by that kind of thing in North Carolina generally. We should be designing effective stormwater management.
Looks like the latest edition of House Bill 600, which is on the internet. It does not include the stormwater. It stops at the animals not wearing required rabies vaccination tags. So,
It crossed over, right, in May,
It's sitting in Senate rules.
May 4. And I don't know what its new number in the Senate is, but
Go there 2 weeks, right there.
the version 3 that I read again yesterday does have stormwater a stormwater section in it.
Actually, I see the latest plan, I had the.
You have to scroll and scroll and scroll.
Yeah, actually, I do see
They're in
that.
several places.
So something to watch out for.
Page
Yeah.
4 of book
Okay.
20 in the building.
Yeah.
It's expanded.
It's
Yeah,
not, it's not written in English, it's the Martian.
So,
But anyway,
just
there it
to,
is.
so as we mentioned,
Like a big
we,
old spider.
as we mentioned, we will, we do have scenarios that we're going to work through a little bit later as well. If you have any more questions, I'm happy to address them. And if we need to table them, we can for later. But the last thing I just wanted to quickly mention here is that, as you can see on page 49, there are two, as a part of our continuous improvement processes here, we do have birdies and aces. And one of the birdies that we're looking at is the continued implementation of our document imaging system. It was kicked off this year in 23. It's going to continue moving forward. And then there are two aces that are scheduled actually for FY24, which is to evaluate ways to automate employee timekeeping, and then looking at our recruitment and hiring processes to help make sure that we're meeting the needs and making sure that we're doing all we can to meet our needs for here within the village. So, that being said, I would welcome anybody as well to look through, starting on page 50 to page 72. These are our strategic goals and our key performance indicators, how they align with.
One question, page 53, initiative action plan, update the PDO. There's no money in that for FY24 to FY28.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
How
forward.
What?
It's a roll forward.
Roll forward.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you.
Yes. And so, as I was going to mention, for people who may be watching this at home, this is the section where you can see kind of, again, what you've seen a little bit within the balanced scorecard, but then also where we have comps that are available, where we may be meeting, exceeding, or where we have some room for improvement with our comparative comps.
Page 55, we note that resident satisfaction with the enforcement of codes and ordinances has been historically lower relative to other satisfaction ratings in the survey, and we strive to improve it, etc. Is there any particular thing we're doing to tweak that to help us improve it? Or what do we view as the challenge there, I guess is the question.
The challenge is that different people see satisfaction in different ways. Some people in our community will say they're not satisfied because we're being overly restrictive, and some people in our community will say they're not satisfied because we're not doing enough. So when you tip the balance in one direction, you're taking away votes on the other side.
We do also have, I believe, a position. It's a part-time position, code enforcement. Now, that doesn't go necessarily towards satisfaction numbers, but talking about code enforcement in particular, way in which we're also trying to.
So we're adding, there's going to be a new staff person to
It's already within FY23, right? It was,
Right.
Yeah, it's
It
basically.
was slated 23, yeah.
Well, that's a plus for talking point, then, that's what I was looking for. Thank you. I had a question on, somewhat related, page 61, the street lighting issue.
Yes.
Now we know, much like the village manager stated, there's some more street lighting, some less.
Yeah.
Do we have an approach we think will, the people who want, well, I guess, the people who want less, basically we don't have to add any streetlights there. That wouldn't be on our list to add streetlights. But the people who want more, we may need to, that's where we would actually make an addition. So in one case, we really don't do anything other than maybe have a dimmer bulb or so. I don't know how you satisfy people who think there's too much. But the people who don't think there's enough, the solution is an extra street lamp or something. Is that, how do we address that? Because that is a question that comes up. It came up in the survey of priorities among residents, the matrix and all. Yeah. Any thoughts there, just so I understand?
What we used to do was when we were, we used to have the street lighting question in the sidewalks or walking paths.
Yeah.
things coupled. So when we went into a neighborhood and engaged them about sidewalks, we would also engage them about their desires for any additional street lighting.
Yes.
And we did that because kind of the genesis of all of this, of the kind of strategic investment in the sidewalks several years ago was a revelation that when our community was telling us that they didn't feel safe walking in their neighborhood at night, it wasn't about crime, it was about the streets are dark and there's no sidewalks, so they were coupled. Last year, we decoupled those things. So, and I don't even recall if we still kept that small line item in our future, our 5-year plan for incremental investment in street lighting.
I think there is.
Yeah.
I think
$5,000.
10 grand.
10,000,
Yeah.
In the 2021 survey, that was the second highest priority of the village. And I didn't realize that until I prepared for this and started to look back on it.
Yeah.
So there are only certain things that there was a lot of agreement on, and that was one of them. But again, I guess it depends on the neighborhood as to where you address it. So we do have some funds, and we can apply them as appropriate. That's what we're saying, right?
Yeah. A case in point is that our most satisfied neighborhood is a neighborhood that has 0 streetlights.
We talked about this last time. By Kyle got it.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm fine, thanks. Do you have any questions on that? Which pages?
Well, if we, unless we have any other questions, I'm going to take a pause here and throw it over to Dana to throw us into general fund budget.
So if we turn to page 73, the general fund tab, we have, our overall general fund budget that we're proposing is a total of $26.9 million. A balanced budget as required by the North Carolina statutes, but we are going to use about $600,000 of fund balance appropriation to balance that. If you turn to page 74 and 75, those two facing pages, there's further details of the revenues and expenditures. On the revenue side, we have the 11% increase in the ad valorem taxes that we'll talk about further when we get to the revenues in detail. We are decreasing the tax rate because of the revaluation, but due to inflationary causes and other things, we are still going to be kind of increasing that overall tax revenue. In terms of kind of the overall breakdown of our revenues by type compared to previous years, our tax revenue is about 51% of the total revenues, consistent with prior years. That's usually around the 50-51%. We do have a couple items this year that are in here that were not there last year, such as the fund balance appropriations and our increase in the permits and fees. You can see a pretty significant increase there, about $350,000, which is due to the USGA licensing fee for the US Open coming up in June of 2024. On the expenditure side,
Before you,
yes.
What's the decline in the restricted intergovernmental revenue? What's that about?
It was primarily because of grants. We did have grant funding in FY23 in our estimate and in our amended budget. We don't budget any grant funding unless it's money that we already have a grant agreement in place, and so we have none budgeted for FY24 at this point.
Thanks.
Yeah.
And my question was a grant question. The materials show that we had 3 grants last year, which is great. I understand that. Budgeting for grants, who's responsible for looking at the lay of the land to see what grants are available? I mean, I guess the water, not water, the glass recycling was a grant.
Mm-hmm.
But who looks for grants? Is somebody else?
There's not one single belly button. What we find most often is that when our department heads and other leaders attend conferences across the state, they're informed about grant opportunities, they bring those opportunities back for our consideration.
Okay, are there years where we don't get any grants?
There are certainly years when we don't get any significant grants.
Yeah, but I
But
mean,
what-
3 small grants is better than nothing.
Yeah, I mean, you might be able to appreciate that a lot of grant opportunities are tied to
A need.
what are viewed as communities of need and different metrics that are associated with that, and we don't tend to qualify for them.
I guess the follow-on question is, in your assessment, or brings everybody sitting around the table here, are we maximizing our opportunities to get grants as a village? Is there a way to improve it?
Probably. Is the
Some-
juice worth the squeeze? I don't know.
Yeah, but then that opens up something saying that, answering the question, is the juice worth the squeeze? And are there opportunities for improvement in getting those grants? I think would be the question, not saying, let's target that specific grant and go after it.
Yeah.
I don't like leaving money on the table.
Mhm.
It's free money, just like
Yeah.
anybody else sitting around here. And certainly, when I'm at TJ Cog, and she's probably, Dan's probably getting tired of my emails to her, but every time I see something about a grant, I'm firing off to her.
Right.
And I just want to make sure whatever process we have, or lack of process, let's look at it and say, is there a way to maximize free money? Other people's money.
Yeah. Sorry,
But-
not to interrupt, but I don't think our community is of the size where we need like a dedicated grant writer or
Got it.
anything like that. I don't think.
And I'm
that
not
would
suggesting,
justify it.
again, what I'm asking right now is there a better way to do this?
Yep.
And I think at least it's worth looking at that. I'm not saying let's go do it just yet, because you may come up with the idea saying, no, actually, we're pretty much maximizing what we've got with the process right now, and there's no reason for change. And then that's a fair answer.
Yeah, that's definitely something we can look at in terms of just evaluating our process and see if there's anything additional, kind of incremental that we could even do to improve the yield on that. On the expenditure side, we do have a total decrease, and on the revenue side as well, we have a overall decrease of 8% in the total budget. That's primarily driven by, on the revenue side, we had the $5 million in ARPA funds last year, which we do not have in FY24. And on the expenditure side, mostly the decrease in capital, and then kind of offset with increases in some of the other areas, primarily for salaries and benefits. Otherwise, I think expenditures are pretty consistent with the prior year. The capital items are, for this year, pretty much routine in nature. The significant ones we had last year were the replacement of the turf field and the $1 million that was budgeted originally as capital for the library.
So the big decrease in cultural and recreation and prior to this year is the turf.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And the library, yeah.
Yeah, the turf and library both are within that cultural and recreation function.
Okay.
Yes, so when you're comparing to last year, that I think was about a 6% decrease, I believe. Yeah, and then that basically got spread across the other functions, which didn't change significantly from previous years. And just a quick note on the debt service, we do not have any sort of traditional debt in terms of a loan or bonds or anything like that. This debt service just represents the future obligations we have to pay for leases of copiers and some other equipment. The accounting standard, GASB 87, requires us to report that as debt service, just so that we have it on the books that it is a liability. We have made a commitment and a multi-year agreement to make those payments. So this, that $19,000 in FY24 just represents the payments we're required to make on those leases.
Then the general government expenditure would be all staff-related expenses.
So general government includes the governing body, administration, financial services, and HR. So those functions, those departments.
Oh, I see, okay, good.
Yes, yep. So yeah, these are broken down based on kind of the function or service that is provided by the departments, and all expenditures of a particular department are reported in that function. So salaries and benefits, operating and capital are included within that function for a particular department. If we look, the kind of net result of the FY24 budget yields an estimated ending fund balance of 18.4 million or 68.4 expenditures, which does include an estimated budget to actual variance, as we always have included. In FY24, we did increase the budget to actual variance that we estimate for on the expenditure side. Historically, we had used that we would assume we'll save 7%. We did increase that to 8%, just based on our historical trend over the last 5 years or so, in terms of what we have actually realized in budget to actual savings. So we did increase that a little bit. I think the primary cause of that increase in the historical trend has been higher lapsed salaries due to vacant positions, the challenges with hiring, in addition to supply chain challenges, not getting as many items kind of within the fiscal year where those funds are budgeted, but those funds do get rolled over to the following fiscal year. That fund balance, is on page 81. Forgot to mention to jump ahead to 81 for the fund balance discussion there. All right, any questions on kind of the overview? If not, we'll move into the discussion of the revenues.
Yeah, this is, we'll get into the next one. The issue of sales tax projections. We, not just us, but the county, I guess, at large, have historically underestimated in the last few years the amount of sales tax projections. What do we put in as a number? Is there a rule of thumb that we put in based on what's been happening in the last few years as to what we anticipate?
We do use the North Carolina League of Municipalities puts out a memo every year with estimates and projections of growth or decline in all of the different unrestricted intergovernmental revenues, all the different taxes, so the sales tax, the telecommunications, et cetera. That is probably the primary guideline that we use when making our projections. The growth in sales taxes has been unprecedented and unexpected, I think, for the number of years that it has continued to grow at the level that it has. The projected percentage for this year is about 6.5%, which is about half of the actuals that we kind of have been experiencing.
My second question was, what in the past, what has been the end result? What was the variance between our projection and what we received? Are we off 3%? State off 3%? Whoever.
Yeah. Well, we make our own projection for budget purposes.
Yes.
And even if you look back at the NCLM projections, those have been lower than the actuals. I'd have to look at them more closely to see it by how much. I think it's something that we at least have taken the approach to budget conservatively. It's not a revenue that we are in control of, and that consumer behavior can change at any time. And so it's not a source that we want to rely too heavily on at the point where we're developing the budget, in case it does go south. We always, at least the last several years, that has always been adjusted up during the mid-year budget amendment. By that point, we have 3 or 4 months of actuals to have an idea of what that trend is. And that also does help us inform then our projection when making the budget for the following fiscal year.
So the NCLM did you say 6.5%?
Yes.
That's for this coming year. The first paragraph on page 87 describes this.
Okay, thanks.
David, to that point, US Open will be here in June, and there's a lag in collecting it, and we
Correct.
It could be a big bump because of the hotels, the restaurants, the shopping.
Yes.
But that big bump, we won't see until the new fiscal year, and then we adjust at mid-year based on the actual impact of the US Open and sales taxes.
Yep. That's correct.
With regard to our recent sales tax collection history, and when I say recent, I'm talking the past several years, there really have been two primary disruptions. First is the collection of online sales tax, and really nobody really knew what was going to happen as a result of that. I think everybody across the board probably, to Dana's earlier point, projected conservatively on that, and as a result, we came in much higher. And then the second is this, this kind of I'll characterize it as runaway inflation, but it's not really runaway inflation. But we had a significant spike in inflation, and that there's a direct correlation between inflation in the cost of goods and services and the taxes that are levied on those goods and services as well. And I say that to say this: we shouldn't draw any conclusions from our recent history with regard to how this sales tax thing has played out, because it was driven by disruptions in the market, if you will.
I'd also add, we could very well be in a recession a year from now. And,
Right.
Yeah.
How much of the, $1 million, I think it was $1.5 million last year and $1.7 million that we're projecting this year to salt away, comes from the amount of sales taxes, et cetera, that are higher than what we projected in the budget?
None. When you say this year, you're talking about the FY23 projection, or what's built into the 24 plan?
No, for 2023, we're expecting 1.7 million, I think.
That's our
Or is that
excess of
24?
revenues over expenses. 1.7 is what's being
Right.
projected to carry into the general fund at the end of
yes.
this fiscal year.
Right.
Yes.
And then last year, 2022, I think it was 1.5
Yes.
million. So how much of those dividends, if you will, that was the wrong one, comes from the fact that we got sort of a windfall of additional sales tax revenues? Again, the wrong word because it's more than that. Above what we budgeted for.
Yes, so at least for FY23, the mid-year amendment increased the sales tax revenues by about $500,000, so we feel we've been tracking in terms of reaching that higher sales tax budgeted number. So we should be on track to meet that budget. So I would say of that number where we factor in the budget actual variance, you could say 500,000 of that is associated with the higher sales tax revenue versus what we had originally.
But we can't
budgeted.
necessarily anticipate another windfall like that
No.
every single year.
Correct.
We may have blown through our windfall, and that may level off instead of continuing to go up.
Right.
And then the rest of the 1.5, and 2 years ago, 1.7 this year, would be from expenses that we anticipated that we didn't actually have to spend.
Correct. Yep. That's correct. Right. As far as the trend and not wanting to, and the leveling out of the sales tax growth, I think in 22 it was, or 21 it was 19% over the year over year. In 22 it was 13%. This year we're now at about 10%. So yes, it's still double-digit fantastic growth, but we are seeing it decline. And at some point it will level off back to the maybe 2-3% that it historically had been before the online sales tax started to be
And
collected, et
we're
cetera.
still projecting it conservatively,
Yes,
even though it's.
even with that
but-
curve,
But
yes,
Okay.
yes. All right, so we'll go back to page 82. That's the ad valorem taxes. I know this is something that we have discussed with you, council, quite a bit at this point. Obviously, a revaluation year, so there's much to discuss and consider. The revaluation done by the county resulted on average in about a 49.5% increase in the property values within Pinehurst. We are required to report the revenue neutral rate, which would be the tax rate on the new valuation that would yield the same tax revenue dollars to the village as the prior year being FY23. And that rate is about 21.2 cents per $100 of valuation. The village kind of has adopted a policy or practice of at least considering what the inflation-adjusted revenue neutral rate is, meaning that we want to take into account the fact that there has been inflation over the 4-year period since the county had last done a revaluation in 2019. Over that time period, when we adjust that revenue neutral rate of 21 cents for the impact of inflation over those 4 years, which was almost 18% when you look at the CPI over that time span, it yields a an inflation-adjusted revenue neutral rate, it's a mouthful, of about 23.5 cents.
Let me ask you a question there. The 4-year average is not 18% on the
No, when
inflation
you-
rate.
Cumulative.
Right, so
Cumulative.
Cumulative,
Correct.
so, but the 4-year average on an annual rate would be.
Would be different. I have not looked at what that
No,
would
I
break down
would
to
be,
yet.
I don't know, it would be
Should have been roughly 4%.
4 or
Yes.
5%. Okay.
But it's that cumulative change.
It's cumulative versus annual rate. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. You know, we are not required to adopt either one of those two rates. They're really meant to be informative. We still look at what tax rate is sort of appropriate given the other budget requirements that we have and what can be justified. Our proposed rate is 23 cents, so a half a cent less than the inflation-adjusted rate of 23.5. This would yield about $13.6 million in property tax revenue, which is an increase of about 1.4 million from last year. So that increase compared to the FY23 revenue is a combination of that inflationary factor that we're capturing in the tax rate, as well as growth. So there still is a component of that is our projected growth for the year for new properties. The motor vehicle piece, you see it goes down. That is purely because we expect the valuation, our motor vehicles are not revalued by the county as part of the revaluation. And so our decrease in the tax rate causes the motor vehicle tax revenue to go down. We're assuming that the valuation basically will stay the same aside from about 1%. I think we see 1% growth for motor vehicles. So that's the reason that you're seeing that decrease for motor vehicles in that revenue specifically. And that we are recognizing it as it's collected so that we have a 100% collection rate. Our collection rate on the property taxes is excellent. 99.9% is what we project, and based on our historical actual collection rate being, I think, 99.95 or somewhere thereabouts. So we're very fortunate there that we have very good taxpayers.
Don't you say somewhere in here that this is the highest collection rate in the state?
It is definitely up there. I know at least within the county, it is definitely the highest, and it's definitely in the upper echelon across the state, for sure.
Could I ask a question about the real and personal, that second line, which, you know, is $6,000 and $5,000? Is that the tax on like business equipment and stuff like that?
So that is from,
Or is that frozen jewels?
The prior years, the real and personal prior years, that's the line you're referring to, the second line that has, we budgeted 5,000.
What is that?
So that is, we account for the property taxes in separate accounts based on the year that they're levied for. And so that is sort of the lingering amount that was unpaid from in FY24 budget, you know, unpaid from the FY23 levy that people end up paying late, and that we get, we'll anticipate getting in FY24. Because of the high collection rate, it's a very small number.
Gotcha. Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Yeah, we do, and then, you know, we do budget a small amount, roughly 10,000 for discount. We don't allow any, we don't give a discount for paying the taxes early, but for any reliefs or refunds, as well as about $5,000 for tax interest for late payments.
I think as we drill down on the tax revenue side, I think we really need to relook the 18% rate that we're applying on inflation. I think to do it cumulatively is not as reflective as doing it on an annual basis. Even at the high point of the inflation rate under the Biden administration, it was 9.1%. So just something to factor in. We're not going to do the math right now, but I think that's I think citizens will grab that right in their mind. I know it sticks out with the discussion.
Yeah, and to clarify to that point, we use that as sort of a benchmark, and that's not necessarily the tax rate that we adopt. We still go through the exercise of justifying any change in the tax rate. And for this year in particular, really looking at that revenue neutral rate, what then supports the getting to the 23%, kind of closing that gap. And in this year, we already had planned in previous SOPs for a half-cent increase from 23 to 24 because of the additional pension costs. When you kind of translate that in based on the higher valuation, it's about 1/3 of a cent. When we get to the expenditures in more detail, we'll discuss, you know, the COLA and other salary increases, new positions that are being funded. Those equate to about 1.3 cents in terms of tax revenue for the COLA, and about 1/2 cent for the new positions that we are proposing to fund. When you add all that together and you start at the 21-cent revenue neutral rate, that gets you to 23.3 cents. So we feel that those are sort of justified elements of the budget increases that are needed. We kind of get to that point where, okay, the 23 cents makes sense in terms of the increase versus the revenue neutral, as well as it being, you know, sufficient to fund the budget overall.
Pat, you're suggesting an inflation rate more related to current than average over a period of years, is that right?
No, I'm suggesting that we average it. If we just pick 1 year, it could be a horrible year.
The other way around. Okay.
Yeah, but from a planning, I don't know how
I
we
just
did it.
wanted to understand.
Yeah, I don't know how we did it over time, how we've done it, but this is the first time it's hit me that we're taking the 4-year cumulative. I don't know if that's how we've historically done it. If we did, I missed that. But
It's how we've done it in the past.
Yeah.
When we were in an era of 1% and 2% inflation.
Correct.
It just didn't jump out at people.
Correct.
yeah, so, and it also, it seems so tiny.
Yeah.
Now, we did, like I said, the highest rate in the last 4 years was 9.1%.
Right,
Federal
and
government.
we've talked about, why we think it's appropriate to do a CPI adjustment to our tax rate.
And I think the CPI
The
adjustment.
one side of it is, as we described, it's because everything we do costs more, right? So
Right, sure.
every dollar that comes into the village is worth less.
Absolutely.
The other part of it is that this whole revaluation thing, there's a portion of increased property values that is entirely due to inflation, right? It doesn't explain it all. I mean, property values don't necessarily track one-to-one with inflation, but there's a component of that. And so we're trying to correct back for the inflationary component of property valuation increases.
And the 3 years before that, there was no inflation adjustment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. For anything, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
For property values or,
Right.
Yeah, or to
Tax
kind
rates,
of,
yeah.
right, to kind of make up for the cost of things in the
Yeah.
village being more
Right.
expensive, yeah.
But we were gradually increasing the rate.
Yeah, I don't know if
Not-
there's
Decrease the rate.
Yeah,
No.
you mean the tax rate?
The tax rate.
There was a year when it didn't go
Well,
down a half
but we
cent.
were planning to increase it,
Mhm.
and then we decreased it.
Mhm.
But, yeah, I had to find the chart, but historically it was kind of 28, 29, 30.
No, but I was gonna-
You were gonna say something?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't know if I've seen it, you guys, have you seen a period as tumultuous? We've had COVID, we've had this increased revaluation, we've had inflation. It just, there seems to be so much turmoil within what impacts a village in the past 3 years, and I don't know if there's an answer to it. Have we ever seen a period that was this tumultuous before 2020? But we've just kept it steady, and just, I'm amazed at how steady you guys have been able to keep this with everything that's impacted our finances. That's all.
What you got, Matt? Or Dana?
Then,
Stay still going?
Yeah, just one last note before we move on from the taxes, if there's no other questions there, but of course, the actual impact to the taxpayers is of a lot of importance, of course. And whether someone's tax bill is going to go up, go down, that amount of change, of course, is going to be very individual to their property. The 49.5% increase is an average for the village's entire tax base of now $5.9 billion. And so it really varies. We do have information on how taxpayers can collect calculate their new tax bill, et cetera, that is helpful. And so the individual impact on average, will be an 11% increase for the average home value in the village. That equates to about $116 increase in their tax bill for the village portion of taxes that they will see. Just to give that a little kind of frame of reference there.
And didn't we figure out from questions Pat was asking over the last few weeks that the maximum will be about 29%, something like that, if your property doubled or whatever?
No,
What was it?
I don't think the maximum is, at least not from some taxpayers I've heard about,
Yeah.
but the maximum is not, unless you've got some data, I have not seen it.
I do not on, individual properties to be able to determine.
What's the number of tax dollars
We have
per
that.
$100,000 of property
I
value?
have that somewhere.
I know you told us already what happened.
Per 100,000?
Yeah, so if you've got,
$230. Yes, so for every,
$230.
yes. So for every
Right.
$100,000 of assessed value on your property, you'll pay $230 in
and that's
tax.
at 23 cents.
Correct, that's at 23 cents.
And that's just your village tax.
Right, that's just your village
I
tax,
know,
of course,
but-
not the
But that's what
county
we
portion.
control, so,
Yes.
so,
That's what.
and what I heard from the man of the county who does the tax revaluation is that it's not a flat 49%. all across.
Right.
Residential went up faster than commercial did, and that condos went up the fastest of all.
Yeah.
My house probably went down based on the yard.
So just to clarify that, you've given us some precise numbers. The average increase on the 49.7% was the average property evaluation increase, is that correct?
So the 49.5% increase is, essentially you could say average, but that was the increase in the village's entire tax base as a whole from the revaluation.
And on the average piece of property, what was the average increase? Was that still
Same.
converts to 49.5?
Yes,
Okay,
yeah, so.
That's what I'm trying to understand when the taxpayer
Yes.
calls you. This is such a simple equation for them to do. It's not usually
Yes,
get to an
but
argument with them.
from one taxpayer to the next, their individual change in their property value could be significantly less than 49.5% if they just bought their home in the last couple years, or significantly more if they have a condo that they bought in 2018, right? Or something like that hasn't been revalued
So
separately, or
for the evaluation
prior to
on the
that.
average is 49.5. The average tax that's going to be asked for that citizen on that piece of property is what? Last year they were paying $100, and this year they're going to be paying what?
If last year they paid what?
$100.
$100.
That would be 11% more.
Yeah.
So that's what I was looking for. The other number was 11%.
Yes,
Okay.
on average, it's
On
an
average.
11% increase.
Okay.
But that's if, their property value went
Sure,
up in
it's
the
on
vicinity of that,
Exactly.
50% roughly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
Well, it gets back to that $230 per 100,000.
yes,
Right.
yeah.
And as was stated earlier, our taxpayers are the most cooperative taxpayers in Moore County and maybe in the state, someone referenced. So they are cooperative and they pay attention with their cooperation.
Yeah.
So, okay, that's very helpful for
Any other questions on the property taxes? Okay. Yep, we'll move on then to the unrestricted intergovernmental revenues, page 80, starting on page 85, the table, the details is on page 86. We talked about the sales taxes, the other taxes that are the local option sales tax and the hold harmless reimbursement that you see in that table. Those together are the sales tax items. You'll see they both increased by the same 6.5%. The other taxes that we have there are much smaller. The telecommunications and video programming generally are declining as fewer and fewer people are using landlines. More and more people are switching to streaming services or other options instead of cable. And then we have the wine and beer tax and electricity, which are having modest, at least the electricity kind of a modest increase there. Any other, and these are projected generally using the NCLM recommendations or projections as our starting point, but we do also look at our historical trends compared to their projections and may adjust slightly from there based on our trends, because the NCLM projections are a statewide average. Each county or area might be impacted differently. Any other questions on those?
Page 91, quick question.
Yep.
We have a new home construction permits in FY23, we're saying 75. I thought I've seen a number in the last couple of months that was significantly lower than that. Somebody here probably knows it to the tip of their tongue.
Wasn't it 50 actual?
I thought it was even less than 50.
I think the quarterly, as of March 31st, I believe there were 23
That's what I was looking for.
year to date.
Okay. So is 75 going to end up, do you think, being optimistic, or do we think it's
So historically, we've been projecting about 150
Yes, we
per.
have. I remember.
So based off of what we've seen so far, we adjusted it down to half of that. Whether or not it's
Still optimistic.
Still optimistic. I'm not in a position to be able to answer that, and somebody else may be able to. But that's just something that we did try to adjust accordingly, and even in the out years, we've adjusted down accordingly for that as well.
Right. When we adjusted to 24 was to 100. Despite the Doug's recession prediction.
It's been a while since I've seen like how the numbers change over the course of a given year, but I think I recall that we get the greatest number of permit
That's what I'm looking for.
applications
Fourth quarter.
starting in early spring through the early summer.
All right, well, we can watch that. I mean, it was a number that I noticed elsewhere.
Yeah.
Noticed it again. Thank you.
Yeah, so while we're on the permits and fees page, this is where we see the $350,000, one time for this year, US Open licensing fee. So that is causing sort of that significant bump, but that is removed then from the 5-year forecast in the future years, since we will not have that revenue. Okay, if we move on to the sales and services, page 92. This primarily includes revenues from the harness track, fair barn, and the recreation fees, as well as some library revenue, which includes sales of books, photos, or any other items from the archives. Some of the significant changes here, the stall rentals are anticipated to go up based on some of the groom's quarters improvements that we've invested in there and are planning to continue in FY24, with the goal being that more trainers will be willing to come and train here if they have better accommodations.
Can I say quick, why do we think we are going to get more revenue from the stall rental, but less revenue from harness track shows and events?
So the primary reason is with the US Open in June, they utilize much of the harness track property for that. So basically for the whole month of June, yeah.
Thank you.
They're not able to hold events that they normally would have.
Okay. So that's really an anomaly for when the US Open.
Yeah.
And we can return to normal after that. Okay,
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. Fair barn revenue anticipated to be pretty consistent. We did increase it by $500,000 based on increases in fees, the fees and charges for the fair barn, which have already been approved. We're anticipating a pretty decent increase in the recreation fees. They're adding additional programming for some of the most in-demand programs, such as archery, tennis, and some others. When we get to the expenditure side, you'll see there are 2 positions requested for recreation, and supporting those additional programs is part of the justification for that.
I just have one question on that one. It says we're going to expand recreation and athletic program offerings. Is this just based on current demand?
Yes.
Yes. What we have right now is a recreation superintendent who serves also as the athletic coordinator, which we previously had a standalone athletic coordinator. So that person is performing dual roles right now. And so the idea is to go ahead and separate those 2 roles and reestablish the athletic coordinator position, which is already in the paid class plan, but to hire that position to focus on the athletics to be able to expand the programming in the athletics, as well as accommodate just the natural growth that's occurring in the existing programs.
So there's natural growth plus additional demand.
Yes, I would say that's accurate. Now, I'd have to look at those numbers to tell you, but absolutely.
Yeah, I'm looking
It's
at,
like 1 3/4 positions roughly.
Yeah.
I'm looking at page, I didn't have any problem with that, the hiring issue there. I'm looking at page 133, and it looks like we're getting more participants, but we're having fewer residents in our programs.
I think that's being driven by the open gym programs, where we are getting a higher usage of non-residents in the open gym programs. Now, of course, they pay a double fee.
They pay extra, they should. That's good.
But because of those open gyms running so frequently, it inflates the numbers because that's a group that's there almost daily. And we got a pickleball group that's also growing pretty substantially as well, still seems to be growing.
And how do we, I guess we ensure that our residents are at the front of the line? Is that how that works?
We do most of the high demand programs, so day camps and things of that nature. There is a resident period only of registration that runs, and then non-residents can be opened up thereafter. This year in day camp, there are no non-residents available because residents took all the slots.
I heard that.
In about
Yes.
2 minutes.
Yeah.
I heard
So,
that.
so camp, one of the things that 3/4 position would be able to help do also is expand day camps to meet the demand that we currently have. We still have, we have a ton of residents that are on the waiting
Right.
list.
Can I digress for a minute? Last night I took my dog out for a walk, went to ball field. It looks very nice. I went to the back ball field where there was a game being played, so I thought I'd watch these little leaders. And I asked a question. I said, how come there's no bases out there? There were no bases on the field. And the person said to me, the key we had didn't work to the lock, to the wherever they store the bases. I didn't give my name to anybody. I just thought, let me bring that back to staff. I don't know if the person didn't get the key in the door right, but they went on with the game. It wasn't, that didn't stop these 9-year-olds.
You do what you used to, you think some kids.
No, they were,
Yeah.
Or a t-shirt and that.
It was just like growing up without the nice field. But
Yeah.
anyway, I just mentioned
I'll
that.
ask that. Might have been Optimus League.
Little baseball.
Maybe somebody will get
Okay,
a
no
key
problem.
from their organization.
It's the Sand Hills
We'll find
Optimists.
out. Yeah, we.
Lime shirt versus white shirt.
Yeah, we're a co-sponsor of the Optimus League program, so we provide facilities.
Okay.
And then they take care of everything from there, so I guess somebody's key.
I just
Messed up.
remember that. All
I'll
right.
pass that on, but thank you
Please
for
do.
letting us know.
Okay.
All right, and then just wrapping up our sales and services, the increases for the logo merchandise and the library and archives revenue, primarily driven by the US Open coming in FY '24, anticipating additional sales there. And the library and archives has already been receiving inquiries and I think some interest, right, Audrey, in terms of people looking for photos and other items
In anticipation
of the
of
Open.
yeah, right. Audrey's used to that by now, right?
All right, if we turn the page to the other revenues. This overall is going down by about 30,000. That's primarily due to, in FY '23, we had a one-time bond forfeiture that was recognized in the other miscellaneous revenues line there. That's kind of a non-recurring item. Otherwise, kind of anticipating these to be about the same as previous years. The library endowment income, that's just an estimate. We have to wait until we get the June 30th audit report from an endowment report from the foundation, the Given Tufts Foundation, to determine what the actual amount of that endowment income will be. The other miscellaneous revenues is primarily donations, sales of assets, insurance proceeds, if there are any that are included in there. All right. Investment income on page 95. This is a spot where we're projecting a significant increase just based on the trends that we have been seeing. We've already exceeded our FY '23 amended budget for investment income, and we're budgeting for about 3% average rate of return in FY '24, which I think could still be somewhat conservative, but based on what the feds are kind of projecting in terms of interest rates. But the 98-99% of the village's cash and investments is in the North Carolina Capital Management Trust, which very closely tracks the federal interest rates because it's invested primarily in the treasuries. So, so looking good there. Now that number, of course, over the 5-year forecast, you'll see does go down as we spend down our cash and investment balance.
Jeff's going to solve the debt limit crisis. So
Yeah, we might be overly optimistic if the federal government cannot get some kind of debt ceiling raise and spending cuts done.
Yep.
Our investment income is good.
The next page are other financing sources. This includes just one item for FY '24, about $25,000 of lease liabilities issued. This is just for the accounting standard recognition. We need to have that budgeted for the new copier leases that will be starting 3-year leases in FY '24. The fund balance appropriations on page 97. This contains about $600,000 of fund balance appropriated that is needed to balance the budget. But we're anticipating that we will ultimately not end up needing to utilize fund balance because of our budget to actual variance that we're estimating. Any questions on the revenues?
Just concerned to see the beer and wine go down, but I'm happy to see the ABC liquors are offsetting it. Going back up.
Okay. All right, if there's no questions on the revenues, we'll move on to the expenditures. I think,
If we want to take a break, maybe this is.
yeah, this
I
one,
think
would
it's
you
fine,
like
take a
to
break.
break?
An hour and a half.
I'll defer to everybody else.
All right, break, keep going.
Take a break. Let's keep moving along here. Amy, you're still with us?
All right, so we'll move on to expenditures. If we look at pages 76 and 77, so we're just going to flip back to the summary, just to look quickly at where we have the expenditures by type or kind of the nature. So we have salaries and benefits at about 57% of the total, if you're looking at the pie chart on page 77. And we've discussed this before, that is an increase compared to last year, but last year we had 19% capital, so it's kind of just a shift of.
How much of an increase is it?
I think last year was 51. I want to say somewhere in that vicinity, but again, with more of the significant decrease in capital kind of causing that salaries and benefits percentage to go up, but also coupled with the fact that the salaries and benefits costs are increasing 11% in total year over year. That's really
Last year, we also had a larger total overall.
correct. Yes.
So the percentages differ.
It skews, yeah. So that salaries and benefits budget increase is primarily driven by the COLA increase, the cost of living adjustment for employees, along with, we estimate, an average of 2% merit increase for staff. That actual percentage that each employee can earn ranges from 0 to 3% based on our policy, but we assume an average of 2%. And it also includes salaries and benefits for 4.3 new full-time equivalent positions.
Dana?
Yes.
And Matt, Doug, does the League of Municipalities have a guideline or a recommended cap on salary and benefit percentage of the total budget and other categories like that? We've come from 51 to 57 or so in the last year. Where are we with relation to our peers or any other guidelines such as from the league? I don't believe there's any state statutes on that, but there may be relative to the local government commission and the way they follow municipalities, those that are in trouble anyway. Is there a guideline you have for that?
Not that I'm aware of. I can look into that to see if there's anything. Angie, are you aware of?
I'm not aware. I'm not sure how you would cap it, other than not giving increases in kind. But yeah, I'm not aware of anything that they put on.
I have seen as high as like 70%.
I'm gonna guess it's pretty high, yeah, compared to where we are, but I just wanted to know if there was, so about that. I think we're well within a range, we're still very efficient, but compensation benefits are increasing, and we
Yes.
have to do that to reflect the size of our operations now, and other efficiencies that, or other achievements we wanna make. But that's a number to watch.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, especially because, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, remind me, you mentioned merit pay adjustments. Do we have a performance rating system for our employees? I just,
Yes.
I know, assume we
Yes.
do, I just never really. Okay, thank you.
So I don't expect a response on that, but give me what I need to know, and I think the issues for the council to have in mind. Go ahead. Thank you.
Yep. Yep, so that's salaries and benefits. The new positions are listed on page 3 in the budget in brief.
Yeah.
If you wanted to take a look at those. It includes, as far as full-time positions, an assistant fire marshal, a firefighter, and the athletics coordinator within recreation that we were discussing a little bit previously. And then 2 part-time positions, police apprentice, which the intention with those is they would work, I think, about 15 hours a week and have a few of them. And a part-time recreation assistant.
On that, I'm not back to that page, but page 3 was it?
Page 3, yes, in the budget and brief section.
Your letter. On the fire department, it's plus 3, right? Plus
No.
3?
Plus
Or 2?
2, yeah.
2. So we're not expanding the facilities of the fire department yet. We're looking at that. But we're adding to staff. These aren't replacements, these are additions. So what's driving that need? How did you all come up with that recommendation?
On the staffing side, on the
Yeah,
shift staffing side,
that's it.
we've been closely monitoring our ability to effectively man at the minimum staffing level to operate the apparatus that we have to operate, 2 engines and a rescue truck, plus leadership that's required on scene if we have an event. That comes to 9. 9 is the minimum staffing that we need to be able to maintain for each one of our shifts. What we found is that I think maybe primarily right now what's driving the problem is it is the hire lag and inability to keep all of our positions full. We can't stay at that minimum staffing level of 9. So what we intend to do is add 1 more position. In situations where we are at full staffing, that position will be used as a floater, fill it in on the Kelly days that people that are firefighters have to take off. And in situations where we're not at full staffing, then that position will roll down into a designated shift. The other position is intended to address our problems with meeting our expectations and requirements for commercial fire inspections. And it's a +1 in FTE, but in reality, the bill won't be that great because we have a couple of part-time inspectors now that we intended to get a half of an FTE out of, but we're only really effectively getting about a quarter of FTE out of them because they're just not available. We think we need at least a half an FTE. We've tried a lot of other solutions, and the part-time thing is just not working. So we think we need to hire the full-time position, and then in the future we won't have the requirement for the part-time positions. We're going to maintain that quarter FTE capability this coming year because of the U.S. Open and all the demands on inspections related stuff there. And then we'll see where that goes.
That's a helpful analysis. With respect to the other hires, what's the background to those? We could just cover that whole subject now.
Yeah, Jeff talked about the recreation component earlier.
Right.
So there's a position in 3/4 there? Yeah. And then the last one is
Police apprentices.
the police apprentice. And so this is one of our, we talked to you about this a couple months ago.
Yes.
One of our creative ways to try to get at our staffing problems with regard to recruitment of new police officers. And the idea is, let's latch on to some promising folks that are potentially right directly out of high school. They don't meet the minimum age requirements to be a police officer yet, but they have or they might have aspirations to do something like that. So they might be attending community college here locally, and we might be able to use their services for a relatively low number of hours per week, doing some administrative work for the police department, maybe working on parking enforcement, maybe there's even an opportunity to use them for some nighttime code enforcement types of things. But the idea is to, like I said, get a hold of them while they're young and nurture their interest in the law enforcement profession, with hopes of then, when they turn 21, getting them through the academy or the police training here locally, and then bringing them back.
I'd like to come back to the Parks and Rec, Jeff. And as you explained it just, 20 minutes ago or so, it's a jobs being split, or that's one of the main things that's happening, right?
Yeah, so
We're currently operating pretty well with the staff we have, so why just splitting it and adding a
yeah, so it's partly demand driven, and it's partly the fact that we've got one person doing 2 full-time jobs. This was put in place starting about 2 or 3 years ago, where we wanted to restructure. So the Parks and Recreation is the 3rd largest department we have, has no second command. So we embarked on establishing a recreation superintendent to reduce the span that Mark Wagner was having to manage. And we did that without adding headcount by taking one of our coordinators and giving them the dual role.
Yeah.
But the dual role, while it is working to a degree, the demands of the programming side of it and the desires to slide fair barn operations under the recreation superintendent is driving the desire to split those positions back out. And that had been our plan all along. We're just now to the point where we're trying to make that happen. What that'll do, obviously, is it allows us to, with the athletics, to meet not only current expanding demands, but also to expand existing, not existing, but future athletic programs right now that kind of he is at a max of what he can do with athletics. So the idea was to split the recreation superintendent and the athletic coordinator roles back apart, which again had been our plan. We'll have the recreation superintendent will supervise all of the recreation coordinator staff. They'll supervise and manage the community center. They will also supervise and manage the fair barn operations. So all of those will fall under recreation. So that will give Mark the ability to, or whoever will be our next Parks and Recreation Director, some ability to delegate more things that direction, so we can focus more on the harness track and buildings and grounds functions and operations.
You know, Mark's going to retire. Okay. And October, right?
That's right.
So the main departments of Parks and Rec are going to be what? It's going to be
What would become, if this were to come to fruition?
Yeah.
I've got this might help you visually to see the structure of how it would come to pass.
Yes. This is not a setup. I have no idea.
No,
Thank you.
I understood that, it may not be as clear.
This is as it is today.
No, this
This
is
is
not.
as it would
This is
be.
how it would be.
Okay.
The current operation has the Fair Barn, which is on the far right-hand side of this organizational chart, reporting directly to Parks and Recreation Director. The Recreation Superintendent role that you see there also serves as that athletic coordinator. That's what they were doing originally before we gave them all the additional duties. So they do supervise the other two coordinators that you see under that organizational chart, but they also do all the athletics too. And it's too much for them to try to do all of those effectively. So this would be the proposed organizational structure if we hire the recreation superintendent. So we'd have, obviously a buildings and grounds superintendent, track superintendent, and recreation superintendent that would be reporting directly to the director, in addition to the administrative assistant. And we have all the recreation functions and roles and the facilities related to that under that recreation superintendent.
I see.
So we just think this is a more effective way to operate going forward. We're just getting to the point and growing to the point that capacity of the staff themselves is getting to be a challenge. The recreation superintendent part-time role, 2/3 part-time, would assist under the recreation superintendent's duties here, would assist the recreation program coordinator and the athletic coordinator, and maybe to some degree the Fair Barn, but mostly those other two functions, because the special events already has an assistant that helps them.
Okay. The reason I'm asking these questions, not only about the Parks and Rec, but the others, is that staffing is our most important asset, and it's our biggest expense.
Yep.
So we just want to make sure that council, as we go forward in this discussion, where we understand now why we're making these changes. I think everybody's comfortable with that. If not, this would be a good time to discuss that, and we'll get into implications later. But I think particularly, Jeff, just looking at your chart here, this is a helpful organization to see. And I'm going to gather that is there a date that we have now to have the master plan coming back to the council? What's the date we'll start to see some documentation?
Don't have a date on that at this point, but I know they're very far along.
Yeah.
You heard anything at all, Lee? I know you're contacted
Yeah,
sometimes.
All right. So
Yeah, I'm not sure, but it's gonna be pretty soon.
yeah, this organization will be part of that plan.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Well, the implementation would
Correct.
certainly fall into this operation.
All right. So, well, fine. Well, council, we understand. Is there any questions about other staffing related matters, since we're on that topic now for the budget now for this next year?
Yeah. Question, where are these folks all physically located?
So the right half of the organizational chart,
Recreation super, yeah, where would they be?
they are all at the community center.
At community center.
The center portion, of course, is at the track. That's what we expect. And I say the right-hand side, other than the Fair Barn. Obviously, the Fair Barn staff is at the Fair Barn itself. So
Right.
That's part of the supervision challenge is all of these divisions that are under Parks and Recreation are all fairly diverse, and they're not as interrelated or connected. I mean, they are to a degree, but they're also not in the same location. And so there's a lot of, you got several people that are functioning in a different facility, in different locations. So Fair Barn is at the Fair Barn. The rest of that you see under the recreation superintendent is in the community center. The track is obviously at the track itself. The superintendent, the office is there, as well as all their staff operate from there. And then the buildings and grounds staff, their offices and operations are kind of diagonally across the street from us here, beside the police department. To the left of the police, you face the police department, to the left. They're down in that hole down in there.
There's that little.
They're very well hidden.
They're in a way, you may not know that it's
You
there.
may not even realize it's there, but yeah, it's there. That's where they're all function. All their functions operate from there, so.
And
We're a little bit spread out.
I got you. Where's the director sit?
Community center.
Community center.
And then the administrative assistant is the front desk person at the community center.
Yeah.
Community center.
John, to your point, I just wanted to, we had an update on the Parks and Recreation Master Plan. The current projection is to have recommendations to council in July.
Great. Great. Thank you for that update. Those are my questions. Anybody else got personnel related stuff in the budget? Dana, back to you.
Okay. Yep, and just one last thing to highlight as far as the positions and the total full-time equivalents that we have within each department. doesn't have a page number at the bottom, but within the introduction tab, it has the green leaf image underneath. There's a table with all of the breakdown of the FTEs by department and the trend that we're projecting through 28 as well, if you wanted to take a look at that. Last thing to note in the salaries and benefits, the group insurance costs, where the village pays for the health and dental insurance costs for all just the employee coverage. If they want to add family or any other dependents, that's at their cost. But the group insurance cost is a significant portion of the benefits that we offer. While we're projecting the cost of the group insurance to go up by 10% from 23 to 24, that's building off of a lower number, kind of as the base. We changed carriers in 23, which we did achieve some savings from that.
Dan, what page are we on?
Yep, so that was just we can go back to 76 and 77.
Thank you.
Yep. For now, but we'll be doing quite a bit of flipping around, so don't get any paper cuts.
I just did.
Oh.
Spoken into existence.
I did. I'm sorry, Doug. Okay, so if there's no other questions on salaries and benefits, we'll move on to the operating, which the operating is, any expenditures other than salaries and benefits and capital. So these we're projecting total decrease of $300,000 or 3.3%.
What page are you on?
76 and 77.
Thank you.
Yep. Just looking kind of overall, at changes. So the FY23 budget includes $508,000 of reappropriations that were carried forward from FY22. When you take out the impact of those, we're kind of actually increasing the budget by about $209,000 or 2.4%. So there are, we're talking about inflation and other things, and yet you're seeing the operating budget go down. That's primarily the reason why. It's just because of the impact of those carry forwards that's in the 23 column. We'll go through some of the significant items. Now if we flip to page 99 with all your faces on it, governing body. This is the start of the section that details and provides information on the operating expenditures for each department. So there's a departmental profile, a table with the budget summary, breaking down the expenditures. If there are revenues directly associated with a particular department, there's also a table for those. And then there are none for the governing body, but for all the following departments, there are tables with the key performance indicators and trends for each of the departments. We're not going to walk through each of them individually, but certainly if you have any questions, we're happy to answer those.
I do have a few questions. On page 101, the Measuring for Success page, the two with the red dots are both related to percentage of business satisfaction. And do we think we understand why those two are like that?
So,
what's your analysis, I guess, is my question.
And first I'm going to take a step back because this is actually a new look compared to previous years. And so the one, for anyone listening, it's we look at green as meeting or exceeding the goal that's been assigned. Yellow means what we call room for improvement. There's something that we're going to be monitoring. Doesn't necessarily mean we're going to be affecting change, but something we need to be mindful of. And then red means review for improvement. That's an action statement. It's an action item. Sorry, so Pat, to your point, the two reds there. Well, last year when we saw this, in fact, I think it was actually in our November Senior Leaders Pre-Retreat meeting, we actually really sat around and started talking through ways in which we may be able to approach these two areas in particular. Again, as a reminder with this survey, there's a large margin of error associated with this survey. But that being said, we did recognize based off of this and from previous years that we do need to trying to find new avenues. I can't speak specifically on what we are doing differently. Doug, you may have some additional input on that. But we have noticed it, and that we were looking specifically at new ways to communicate with businesses, figuring out specifically ways in which they want us to communicate with them. So we're asking that question right now. And then also with business satisfaction with the quality of life. We've also started those discussions, and Doug, I don't know if you have any more specifics.
Yeah, one of the things we're potentially going to do a newsletter specific to businesses. But we are trying to figure out if they actually think that would be helpful, because we don't want to go through all that effort if it's not going to be worth it. So
We also have to have this committee effort that.
Yes, I was going to make a comment. Go ahead, Jeff.
I think you can probably comment on it more effectively than I can.
Okay, yeah, the quality of life question first. It's hard to understand that background. I know we're trying to dig into that as we have with other subjects over time in community surveys and responses and stuff. What really is behind that? So I'll wait whatever further we can determine. But on the other question, when business is satisfied with efforts to communicate with the village, there's some strengths and there's some weaknesses. There's some good news and there's some bad news. The good news is that over time, in my experience anyway, Pinehurst Business Partners is a much more formalized organization now, and therefore I think much more effective than we've had in a business community organization over time. And Jane has been attending their meetings, trying to communicate things that are happening in village government with respect to businesses, and also bring back information in that sense. That's sort of an NAC, but directed to the business community. And I don't want to draw a parallel to the NAC. I'm just saying it's a way to communicate with that sector of our participants, in this case, the business community. They, to the most part, and I'm talking core village now, they like the actions we've taken on the signage for Dine, Wine, Shop. They would certainly like to see more enforcement of that. We know that we can't enforce some of those things the way we might like, but the effort that we're trying to make is to communicate with the shop owners and the landlords, the second floor businesses, not just retailers, on the spirit of cooperation with respect to parking in the village, among other subjects. And we've been trying to get a sort of ad hoc, informal committee together with some of the business owners, using business partners as the core of that, but including other businesses, and other businesses not just in the core of Pinehurst, but in our outlying areas. And we haven't completed that at this point. Jane, you may want to add something to that in your own experience. If not, no.
Well, no, I do think that the business partners, which are, I attend their meetings because they are the organized group that's out there, are pleased with a lot of the things that the village is doing. They're pleased with the McAdams work. They're pleased with the fact that there's going to be some planters on Market Square. They know that we're chipping away at the parking issue. And so I do think that there is movement there and improvement. I'm not quite sure what business satisfaction with the quality of life actually consists of, but
yeah, what we've done is kind of recalibrated or changed our survey for this year to try to better understand that, what they're trying to tell us.
Jeff, we're on page 101.
Thank you.
And the questions came up of our efforts with Pinehurst Business Partners, the amenity plan Jane just referenced, which I think we're very happy with, and trying to answer why these are red dots, and not green or even yellow. So.
Yeah, we're obviously we've got all our landscaping is complete. Just a quick update. There's a brand new trash receptacle sitting outside here that we just got yesterday as a sample. I think it's too tall, so we're going to order one more that's a smaller version of that. But we've identified some locations that we can move some of our existing planters over to Market Square for the summer, for this summer, for the time being. I have a planter on order that should be here anytime, as a sample again, to make sure that it's what we want, what we like. And then we have a light bollard that is on order, we expect any day now too. All of these things, we just want to, before we invest a lot of money in these particular amenities, we just want to make sure that the samples show looks the way we think they look, and they're going to meet our needs. So once we have approval of those items that we are satisfied with the quality and the look and all of that, then we'll order all of those materials. And so they'll be going in some point in time over the summer, I would hope, early fall. The planters we won't deploy until the fall when we do the fall planting. So we'll switch out those planters at that point.
I think the comments from business owners, landlords, as they have heard about the amenity plan, which Jeff has described us several times, and again, just gave us a nice update right now. I think, I think everybody's been very favorable about that.
It's just, we just got to get it implemented.
Yeah.
Just FYI, to another component, we looked at a concept plan yesterday, the four-way stop at Magnolia and Cheektown, and made some comments, and they're going back to do some additional revisions to that. And the stormwater project is also still moving through its design phase. Got a lot of conflicts down through downtown, a lot of stuff in the ground.
Yeah, underground, it'll
A lot of
where
underground
water.
stuff, a lot of
Yeah,
underground
good luck.
stuff. So, but we're working through that and trying to avoid as many conflicts as we can.
I think that, at least my observation, that the things that the business community, the ones, sort of village that are downtown, that they will be most responsive to will be visual things that they see happen.
Sure.
And the three that pop up, that four-way intersection stop sign thing will alleviate legitimate concerns I think we all have, which is why we want a stop sign there. I think the addition of those parking spaces in that Half Moon area is another visual thing that people, I know when it comes up in discussion, they're sort of surprised, shocked, oh, I didn't know that. And it takes a little air out of that balloon about the parking concern. And also, I think when hopefully when the club completes their parking lot there next to the spa, which might also present some options for parkers. Again, it'll be something they'll see visually rather than something that they only sort of hear about or read about. So I think we've got a good plan. It's just an execution, and obviously everything can't get done in a week or a month, and there are things like stormwater stuff that we can't see, it's invisible, that we can't see right now, because when you dig up the ground, you don't know what's there sometimes. Okay, that's just an observation.
And I didn't mention, but we also will be resurfacing all of downtown roads this winter. And so, again, another downtown will look, it'll look all new for an old town.
Thanks, Jim.
May I ask one more question about the red dots? How many surveys do we send out? Is 100% of the businesses are surveyed?
Yeah, so we send out to every business in which the partner that we work with for the survey has. So they receive a survey of, I think last year, off the top of my head, there were approximately 400 or so that went out. And then we received, unfortunately I can't remember off the top of my head how many we were returned. I think it was approximately 75 or so that were returned, maybe 80. So, but one of the things that we heard last year that was very important around the business survey was making sure that we are hitting truly as many businesses as possible. So when we say every, we can also stand behind that. And so we're working right now to send with ETC our own list of businesses that we've been able to pull together, working with partners to be able to send to them to make sure that we have as comprehensive of a list as possible going out this year.
And then I guess my next question is, if people who are giving the results that give us the red dots are not members of Pinehurst Business Partners, how do we get their input?
So say that one more time.
Okay, if the red dots here
Mhm.
are because of the results that show that there's a problem, how do we get their input if they're not a member of Pinehurst Business Partners?
That is a good question. That's one of the ways in which, as Doug alluded to, we're trying to find for all businesses, regardless of what partnerships or what organizations they may be part of, what they're actually looking for, especially when it comes to both communication from the village, but then also getting to that nebulous quality of life question. As Jeff alluded to, we try to break out that question a little bit more this year to try to see if we can pinpoint specific areas that we may be able to address in future years.
So that way there'd be a way to get input from businesses that are not a member of Business Partners that would be useful in
I
evaluating.
think the real answer here is though that the survey is sent to business addresses,
Yes.
irrespective of whether they're in Business Partners.
Right.
Correct.
Yes.
So they're gonna, all businesses should get that. We
Yes.
had quite a discussion about this several months ago, in December and even
Mhm.
before, about address issues, and some business owners didn't get it, and we understood why, we figured that out, I think. So it's going to all businesses irrespective of who they are, and not just going to members of Business Partners.
Yes.
Well,
And
and
the
I
other
think
thing
they
is-
even determined that there were some doctor's offices or there were places that were, quote, businesses that weren't our typical business that,
You
We're
might
trying to-
respond even, yeah.
Each individual practice was listed as a business.
Yeah.
rather than-
Mhm. Yes.
Whereas we would send a survey to the,
Pinehurst
The
Medical
office
Clinic.
administrative.
Yeah,
for
Instead of
Worksession.
the 20,
Yes.
30, 40 doctors that they have in the
Right.
medical clinic.
yeah.
It's pretty complex. I mean, I assume there's a way also to tease out the salesman working from his home. You know, it's in the middle of a subdivision. It just has a home office and that stuff, but he goes out and sells.
Yeah.
That's probably not appropriate, but it's in the same survey as the Business Partners downtown.
Yeah.
the committee that's under development is intended to be representative, not just Pinehurst Business Partners as well. There'll be
Okay.
representation from other
Okay.
businesses.
Okay.
And I will also say that if we're getting 20% return on the surveys that we send out, that's fantastic. That's a fantastic rate of return. 5% is considered dandy, in my experience.
Well, I just want to make sure that we are hearing from businesses that we consider businesses, I guess they're all vital to the operations, vital to the success of the village. But when you see a red dot, you want to make sure that is reflective of the businesses who are, there seems to be some, not disconnect, but some loosey-goosey way of looking at this in terms of what's sent out, what's come back, what do the results that come back reflect, in a way that then we can do something about it. And it seems like we can tighten that up and focus our efforts more productively.
And the margin of error in this survey makes that all that more challenging.
Okay.
And you do hear a lot of different voices.
Yeah.
And so we do know that even with us working on this list this year and partnering with ETC to make sure that it is a more robust list and we feel very comfortable with it, that businesses do move, businesses do change depending on when the lists are pulled together, et cetera, that we can say that we feel more confident this year than last year, for instance, based on, thanks for the conversations that we've had, but then also that there always going to be a little bit of that variability that also just exists just because of the nature of businesses as a whole.
Different question. Number of website sessions. From 2021 to 2022, it jumped 40%. And in 2023, if our estimate is correct, it will have jumped 52% from 2021. What are we putting in the coffee there? How do we have this growth?
Page are we on?
101.
101, the second option.
line.
So a lot of those are people going to the agenda page for the village council. And we think that maybe a lot of that was associated with the short-term rentals. People were really excited about it.
or anxious.
Yeah. They were interested in some.
It was a phenomenal amount of website traffic. I mean, it's now a bit of a benchmark. Well, we're still, obviously, we think growth will continue, so, I mean, I think that's a good sign of a healthy community. We're assuming these are mostly our residents or people in the area, not people from elsewhere around the country to go to our website. All right, thank you.
Any other questions on particular departmental pages? If not, I'll just highlight a couple of the operating items that I was going to point out before we move on. Okay.
Hold on, I'm sorry, I'm flipping my pages. 102, that question on behind that last page. Percentage of workforce who are satisfied with annual State of the Village meetings. What are the State of the Village meetings? What does that mean?
Every year
you've done one.
we hold, you've been to it, I think. Yeah.
I'm just.
It's done in.
Yeah. The name is a little bit of a,
Well, that's why I
maybe
don't
it's a
call it name.
misnomer, but every year we have I'll say it's a series of meetings, 2 or 3 meetings to try to capture as many of our employees and volunteers as possible, and give them an update on what happened during the year, how our performance compared to projections and expectations, and to congratulate them and thank them for their efforts.
Well, I remember the
And give them
luncheon, the
updates on.
congratulation luncheon. I always attend that. I've drawn a blank on these meetings.
Yeah, it's usually October or first week in November.
Okay.
Yeah.
There was too much cheese pizza was the feedback we got.
Not enough variety.
Yeah, not enough variety of pizza.
That's
Too
right,
much
yeah.
cheese.
It gives, it also
Does
gives
go
staff
deep.
an opportunity
Yes.
to ask the management group
Yeah.
anything they want to ask.
Yeah.
We also update them on, here's the major projects for the year that we're working on,
Yeah.
what's going on in the community.
Okay, thanks very much.
Any other questions? So,
I think that's good.
I'm on to page 105 of the financial services one. Is that okay to ask there now?
yeah, yes, go ahead,
Okay.
ask your
My
questions,
question-
and if we get to a department where I wanted to point something out, I'll.
All right,
Yeah.
my question is, explain to me the 2 red dots that deal with payroll transactions processed per payroll technician FTE per month.
Yep.
Absolutely. So I think this highlights the system that we have here. So these are 2 workforce capacity indicators. So when working through this, we looked at those, and Dana came to me and said, "Hey man, I got 2 red dots.
Red on my page.
I don't want red." But that's why it's really review for improvement, because what it does is that it highlights to us that we need to actually have a conversation. Right? What's going on here? Is there an issue? Is there a concern here? Or in the nature, in this case, we're talking with Dana, that are our assumptions around workforce capacity needing to be updated? And so, back when these were set, the role that maybe for payroll technicians or the finance technician may have been one way, but then over time with the variation of duties and tasks and how they change, they actually have an increased capacity. So I asked Dana, I said, "Hey, are you concerned about the capacity based off of these numbers?" And at the time she told me that it was instead that we think we actually just need to change the range because there's no actual capacity issues that she felt within the job. So going into 24, what we'll do with that review for improvement is actually just make those adjustments to the ranges moving forward.
Is the same technician a finance technician as a payroll technician, or are they 2 separate?
2 separate positions.
And how many do we have? Just
One of each.
Okay.
Yep, one of each.
I'm fine.
Yep.
I just, okay. Page 107, not the red dot, the yellow dot that says percentage of employees satisfied with their health insurance benefits. And I thought I recall we pay 100% of employee health benefits. Is that correct?
Yes.
Or the
Doctor
For the
individual.
For the individual?
Yes.
Right. So are we, I guess, whatever degree of
Are they satisfied
satisfaction
with
is
the
that they
plan?
want the family on the plan?
No, well, it might
It
be
could
part
be
of
both,
it.
yeah.
It could be, it also could be just, are they satisfied with the actual makeup
With the
of the
provider?
plan?
Yeah.
Okay.
With the
What their
provider
deductibles
options, the
are,
co-pays, or.
availability of providers and all of that.
Now, this year, we, in an attempt to, I think, address this to a degree, but we changed our insurance carrier. We went from Cigna to Blue Cross.
Oh, yeah, I remember that,
Shield.
I remember that.
We also added a separate option for a health savings account.
I
We
remember
never
that
had
too.
that. We never had that before, so that gives the employees, some additional option to consider in terms of what works best for them. So
Great.
hopefully that will be something that improves next year, but we'll see when this survey's done again.
It is 2% below what the goal was. So again, as it being yellow, there's no necessary action that we would necessarily have to take unless we see some larger trend, as Jeff alluded to. But we do expect to see some movement, and if it goes one direction, we may have to take some more action to address any concerns.
I don't know, I can't quote the study and how germane it is specifically to this, but I did read a study on this, looked at it, that people's satisfaction with their health insurance when they purchase it, or they're being provided through their company, versus when they actually use it. When they actually use it, the satisfaction rate drops because they find out different holes they didn't expect.
Unless you explain to them ahead of time how it's gonna work.
It's like getting that bill to fix the crown from the dentist.
It's really challenging.
I remember the first time I got that one.
You're paying twice.
When you start drilling down into the plans, it's almost impossible because this plan will cover this lab work,
Yeah.
this one now doesn't, and now it will do with the new.
And it's
It's
changes
impossible.
every darn year,
It's just impossible.
every darn year.
I'm skipping here, if I got another one, page 111. Number of citizens on patrol volunteer hours. I mean, the red dot, I'm sure there's an explanation, but one of the things I noticed is that the estimates for 23 and 24 and projections are ambitious. I was gonna compliment, I don't know if the chief is here, just compliment them on their ambition, but wondering how we're doing. We went from 1539 to 880. Well, anyone got an insight into that? Or?
Well, I can speak generally about this, but one of the things that I know when looking at this, the question became how can we better utilize the COPS program? And I know that Chief has shared generally with me that that's a focus that he was going to be looking at over the next couple of years, just how we can actually leverage those volunteers in that group in different ways to continue to engage them. I don't know specifically what that is and what that looks like, but I think that that's partly the reason why you're seeing that trend go up. But if anybody else has more specifics.
Kelly, I think had a thought too.
I did speak with Ken, and one of the things that's going to increase the numbers in is they are getting ready to prepare to have another Citizens on Patrol school.
Oh,
So,
thank you. Okay. I'm just moving along here. Page 113, it's a fire question. Percentage of full-time uniformed staff who obtain advanced training. Obviously, we had 103% in 2021, and I'm trying to understand what it means that in 2023 it's going to be 40%. Is that? I'm sure there's an easy explanation. I'm just trying to figure it out.
Our goal is to have our staff attend advanced training and be able to bring it back and offer it to our staff. So they may go to the National Fire Academy or FEMA. Of course, the program's offered through the State Fire Marshal's office. They bring it back and train our staff. So it's generally based on when offerings are and when we have availability of staff to go. But we'll send it. We've got 2 people that have applied to go to National Fire Academy within like the next couple of months.
So it's sort of constantly they're doing something.
Yes, sir.
I get it.
It was abnormally high in 21 for some reason. I can't recall what sold that.
We offered one of the rescue technician series for our staff. Offered it here and
Good to
required
hear.
all of our staff to do that.
Oh, it's a required attendance. Okay. Okay. I'm fine there. I guess hold on. I have one other one that.
You guys, for me, the big story is we have this amazing process where we have these measurement tools. And when things start going amiss, when we see yellow dots or red dots, staff is so responsive to this. And it makes me wonder, and I'm sure that I'm going to answer this, how other municipalities have these measurement tools? And how do they operate without measurement tools?
See the fence?
Well, that's what I'm
Good
gonna do.
intentions.
Yeah.
But yeah, but again, I want to compliment staff, I'm going to compliment our process, that we have this process, I love the word process, that we can see how we're doing in so many ways. And when something goes awry, staff jumps on it like that.
Believe it or not, the federal government does this.
Well,
Okay? I just, believe it or not, they passed the law in the 90s called Government Results and Performance Act, or government, whatever. GIPRA is what it's called. The doctor may be familiar with it. I don't know how they use it. But, and they're required to have a strategic plan, a 5-year strategic plan, updated every 3 years.
I'm looking
And
at other
so-
municipalities, Southern Pines, Aberdeen,
Yeah, no, I
Raleigh,
understand.
Cary, Apex, and like you said, seat of their pants.
Some do,
So,
But anyway,
I think it's not the norm, let's put it that way.
There's a trend toward this, though.
yeah, it's a
Yeah,
very
sure, it matters. Right, maybe
because
that's
we
the
do
point.
so well with it. And really, you've got to have performance people like Matt and Carter coming in. It's just, it's very impressive to see you guys take this so seriously and respond so quickly when you see something going wrong.
The other item, page 127, we sort of addressed it earlier, and that was the number of new single-family residential permits issued. We're estimating 28 this year.
I'll double check that,
Okay.
what that
At
estimate is.
least on this chart we are.
Yeah. I will double check that.
Page
Yeah,
91 says 75.
that may have
That was
been,
actually end of third quarter, wasn't it?
that's end of third quarter, yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll make a note.
And
Alex said it's probably pretty accurate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
page 131, I guess I'm curious as to why we think we're going to have much fewer visitors to the Welcome Center from 22 actual to what we're estimating for 23. Has anybody got a thought on that? That's a real drop-off.
So, in general, and Doug, you may have a lot more information on this than I do, but we did see a large uptick from 21 to 22. And so when we're looking at estimates, on a lot of these, we're looking at 3-year averages to help us with trying to understand what those estimates are. I believe we're actually going to be higher than that 23 estimate for this year, but at the time when we were creating our estimates for this year, we were being conservative. I think it was with the 3-year average.
Right. Well, I can see why 21 to 22 would be reflective of coming out of COVID,
Yes.
more visitors. But, okay, I would think it would continue to grow.
Yeah,
Okay,
and
well, I'm
I-
interested in seeing what the end result is there.
I mean, we have adjusted the 24 projection up, obviously, for the U.S. Open as well. But again, as these numbers come into actuals, the 3-year average may shift, and that 24 projection actually may change as we go through next year.
Okay, I already asked the 133 question about residents versus gym. My question was on the page 135 where we're recovering program and event costs through fees. Are those numbers, is the track included or not included?
That would not be
That is not
included there.
included. Yeah,
Not
this
included
is
there.
Okay, thanks. That's all I needed to know. No. Let's see. Oh, one question, maybe Audrey knows, Audrey probably definitely knows this. Page 137, average number of library archive visitors per day open. How many days are we open a year in the library? Just back out Sundays and then federal holidays? Is that how you figure it? Like federal government? That's pretty much it?
That's the
Yeah.
case, yes.
Okay, thanks. That's what I thought. All right.
We are open later than we used to be. A year ago, we stayed until 6 now, and we expanded by another hour on Saturdays. Is that right, Audrey?
That's responsive to demand, right?
Well, trying to be more available to the public. You know, you close at 5 o'clock, and people get off work at 5, and can't get out of the library, so we pushed that to 6.
Yeah, one other question, page 138, library. The number of youth library programs we're estimating 3 this year, but 124 in 2024. How do we, that's some amazing accomplishments. How do we do that?
So, I'll take a stab at this because we did have a conversation. I did have a conversation with Audrey a little while back. There is a renewed focus on youth library programming, and I think there was going to be a review in the beginning of FY24 specifically on that to try to drive those numbers up. So I think it was more of a one, how we're counting youth programs, but then also increasing the number based off of a review. And it's the same thing that's going to actually happen with the adult library programs, although you're not seeing a trend.
No, that's going from 2 to 1 to 3.
Yeah, so
that doesn't.
Well, I was talking more. They're doing a review also on adult library programming as well, because they're starting to. And again, I don't want to put words in Audrey's mouth. That trying to find new and unique ways to get the adult population back into the library. They think it's going to be a little easier with the youth library programs. But now I'm going to be quiet and let the expert.
No, that's basically what you said. But we did have, I know Melissa talked about it. There was a change in the way we counted, because we were counting programs like here's one time we did Gather and Given, or maybe we did it 5 times. That was 5 programs. But we were counting attendees as well that got confused in with it. So how did we change? I can't remember. Didn't you talk to me about?
So off the top of my head, and I don't want to, I can't remember specifics, but I can follow up with you on
because I mean, if 124 is number of attendees, that would be different than the program specifically.
There's no way we would have 124, so we'll check into that.
It may actually be, just because of this conversation now, total number of programs and special participants, which is the 4th one there, and youth library programs may be swapped.
Because if we had 124 programs
you'd be
a year, that we'd have several a week.
I obviously.
We'd be inundating people. We wouldn't have
So
that often.
Again, and I'll confirm this, those 2 numbers may have just been switched.
You can get back to me.
So we do know that there's going to be an increase in youth programming, but I would imagine it's going to be more 4 and 5, right? But the total number is going to be 124. So.
Thanks for asking about that.
I had a question on page 142. I think you guys already answered it. The reason there's a drop in the number of days the harness track is requested for non-equestrian events, I gather, is because of the U.S. Open. On page 142.
Oh, in terms of the estimate?
Yes.
For the 3, that would be for the following year, though.
Yeah, I'm looking at,
Number of days the harness track is
2024. We go from actual 206 to 159. We've dropped it.
Oh, okay, sorry, I was looking at number of days for equestrian events, okay, yeah.
And then we go to 130.
Yes.
But then all the way downstream, we're going to 100. So are we pessimistic about that? Because look at the capacity of stalls, reach for stall rentals. We have a really straight line up there, which is reflective of the money we're investing, I think, in the stalls and the reputation of the harness track. But that one line is the question there.
I'm thinking, but we have to look at this, and I think
we
make a note, look at it, and provide y'all additional information. But I think 21, maybe in 22, but I don't think so, 22. Anyway, I think we had shifted a lot of activities from Wicker Park to the harness track. And so there was a lot of soccer and lacrosse and some of those things going on at the track that have now switched back to Wicker Park. I think that accounts for some of that. I don't know that it accounts for all of it, honestly, though, because we do still use the harness track for some of those things. Soccer.
Could it also be that there's a correlation between the potential increase in stall rentals and the harness track days being used for equestrian events?
No.
No? Okay. I just wanted to
Different times of year.
I just wanted to confirm.
There's a dog show, and it's a lot of rugby out there. We do rugby over there. We're doing soccer and lacrosse over there. So I think the higher numbers in the previous years are more related to the fact that we're the part of this commission with the school and then the renovation of the field.
How do you measure a percentage of customers satisfied with the harness track facility?
We have a survey, a Parks and Recreation satisfaction survey specifically that we do.
Post event, in this case, which one are we looking at?
That one there.
Second from the top.
Yeah, so that is survey of those customers after their event. We also survey our trainers at the end of the season.
I think to some extent, that's being hopefully addressed by the improvements to the grooms' quarters and things like that. Yeah, so we're making investments in that area.
Some of those are hard to get back to, honestly. It's probably it may be a situation with lower response rate, and therefore a dissatisfaction may drive something down a little more quickly. Small numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Small numbers. Yeah. Not because we have small numbers of participants. It's just getting those surveys back to people can be a little challenging sometimes.
Last comment. I found this very helpful in preparing for this discussion. This is something that I gather will be produced again at the end of this fiscal year. But the June 30th, 2022 report for the fiscal year end is a very informative document. It reflects some of the inner workings and information about the village, its employers, taxes, population, all this type of growth. So I'm hoping we do it again. I guess it comes out probably in the end of the first quarter or sometime in the new year. Thank you.
Yes, yes, we will. And also some of that, the demographic type information about employers and highest employers, highest taxpayers is in the last tab of your binder in the supplementary information. So it is, I think, the very last 2 pages.
Yes.
But yes, that same report will be produced.
Thank you.
All right, that's all you have. Okay, so just a couple operating items of note. Streets and grounds on pages 118, 119. Jeff had mentioned we have $75,000 included in the operating expenditures there, which increased by a total of about $100,000 for resurfacing downtown parking lots.
That's the sand lot specific,
Yeah.
75
Yeah.
to redo the service.
Powellville on page 122. So this encompasses all of the road resurfacing. So we've got a total of $1.5 million to resurface about 4.2 miles. 38% of the budget is funded by the associated revenues that we get from the state, which is consistent with prior years on that. Solid waste on page 124. They have an increase of about $230,000 roughly in their operating. Mostly increase in landfill fees, contracted services for solid waste removal, and new routeware software that they're investing in, plus additional costs for gas and repairs and maintenance from fleet. And then we already talked, the last one I had was Parks and Rec, which is on page 132, increase in their operating costs for additional programming that they're going to offer with new and extending capacity based on demand.
Typically those, if the program doesn't go, then it's still,
Yeah.
it doesn't get enough participation or whatever, enough registration, then they just don't spend it. And then there's fees that are coming in on the opposite side of that for revenue to offset that as well.
Yeah.
So most times we're going to spend a little bit more, we're going to take in more. As an offset.
Yep. Page 152, we have the debt service. Again, there's a lot of details in here It's just the obligations that we have to pay for the operating leases for copiers and the postage meter. We will have, there's a similar accounting standard related to IT software subscriptions where we will have to recognize them in a similar fashion where if it's a multi-year agreement and we're committed to pay, that we'll have to show that as debt service. It'll just be kind of taking it out of IT operating expenses and having to display it as debt service. That we're working through those numbers of the impact for 23 and 24. So there'll be budget amendments coming for those. Those numbers are not factored into the 24 budget yet. We didn't have that information available and finalized. And then on page 154, the other financing uses. This 80,000 is the contribution to the kind of anticipated capital project fund for public services relocation for the site plan. And on page 155, we start with the capital expenditures. In total, if we look at pages 156 and 157, which detail out all of the capital that we will be anticipating funding in FY24 from the general fund. It's about 2.8 million, significant decrease from 23 because of the kind of the larger items that were planned in 23.
Hey, a quick question. When we say fiber to Racy Wicker and Cannon Parks, obviously I see the work going on sometimes in the village. It looks like they're putting lines in underground. What are we doing there to Racy Wicker and Cannon Parks? What are we connecting? Is it the community center at Cannon Park? Or?
Community center is already connected to us.
So what's what is that?
Jason's not in here.
Yeah, I forget. I think it was.
Here he comes.
There he is.
Oh, good. How have you right at the door like this?
Oh, right here.
Yeah.
Over there, we're trying to run fiber to put up cameras and Wi-Fi.
Cameras, okay.
We've had some little bit of vandalism and some different things going on, and they've requested cameras, which we really can't do without the right bandwidth. So that's why
Thank
we
you.
requested fiber. Good. I'll be right here.
We know it.
All right.
He works for the NSA.
I think aside from the fiber and a couple of smaller items, much of this the capital are routine, planned replacements or kind of recurring funding, such as the ones in the transportation group, where we have those built into the budget each year and throughout the 5-year plan. So I think this year is kind of back to maybe what an average year would be in terms of capital, with not too many exceptions or kind of one-time items. All right, we'll move on to page 159, capital project funds. First, we have the library, where we have the design already funded for $400,000 in that fund, plus the $1 million that you had just approved, and the additional costs anticipated for construction, bringing the total of that project to about $5 million. There's been some expenditures to date as of the time we prepared this document, about $8,500 for design. As you know, that work is ongoing. For the public services relocation, we have the $80,000 for the site plan that is planned to go into this fund in FY24, followed by $400,000 in 25 for design and $6 million in 26 for construction. The construction piece is planned to be split between debt funding, installment financing, and general fund dollars. And then finally, we have the fire station on page 162. Right now, this is just capturing the $400,000 planned in 28 for design, with that being anticipated as debt funded. All right, and then within the 5-year forecast, starting on page 163,
Question,
There's-
do we usually, or have we done debt financing for design? Can you
Can be,
just say?
it's part of the capital, yeah, it's a capital expense.
Mhm.
I
You would have-
understand
you
the
would have to,
construction
but,
part, I
yeah.
understand the
Yeah.
construction part for debt
Yeah.
financing, I just didn't realize it for actually the design and engineering costs. We're not doing that for the library.
No,
No.
we're building a whole, but that's all out of fund balance, so.
Right. Okay.
So the first several pages of the 5-year forecast section go over kind of the key assumptions and the methodology that we go through to develop the forecast. In developing the forecast, we incorporate information provided by department heads in the budgeting process, the IEPs, OFIs, the capital replacement plans over 5 years, staffing requests anticipated in 5 years. And the 5-year forecast is developed to meet our key financial ratios of having fund balance of at least 30% of operating of expenditures, and an operating margin of 89 to 91%, and maintaining less than 10% debt service as a percentage of expenditures. So you will see that this our plan meets those key financial ratios. The assumptions begin on page 166. Some of the key items, if there are sort of non-recurring revenues or expenditures, we do remove those from future years in the plan. The staffing plan or additional staff anticipated for the library, for example, those are all factored in those particular years. And then we use sort of some, baseline assumptions for inflation, revenue growth, for sales taxes, for example, in those assumptions. If we want to jump to page 170, that's where we have the summary of the 5-year forecast, which you have seen previously. We do have, in the plan, have a 1-cent tax increase in FY26 to account for the additional operating expenditures for the library building opening. Right. Any questions on the baseline sort of proposed scenario that we have here before we look at the other scenarios? Okay.
Just want to,
Well,
if it's all right, be mindful of time as well. It's currently
Yeah.
11:45. And so, but that's been good discussion. I just want to make sure everybody's still comfortable with continuing the discussion as is, or with the amount of time that we have. So, just wanted to throw that out to everyone.
Well, we can certainly kick it off, and then we have a planned meeting, when, tomorrow again? If we need it. Well,
yep, if needed.
if needed, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is the 5-year forecast, and then the capital improvement plan section is all we have left. That just goes into more detail of the individual capital project funds in terms of how they're funded and the total costs, including any additional operating, as well as the fleet, IT, and other capital addition 5-year plans. So I'm not sure how you feel about what we'll be able to get through.
Could I ask one little question about the operating margin, the ins and outs? So we're trying to aim to spend 90% of our current year revenues on current year operating expenses, so that we've got 10% of our current year revenues left over to allocate toward capital expenditures. Is that 90-10 proportion state law? Is it best practices? Is it something that the village came up with or and is used traditionally, or is it something that everybody in this dog uses? Or
I'm not certain on what a comparison to other communities. Jeff, do you have any?
Based on previous conversations, my understanding is that it's best practice.
It's,
Best
Best
practice.
practice.
Just kind of goes back to Natalie Hawkins was here at those times.
John Fry, yeah.
John Fry. And this has been a practice that we've used, standard that we've used for 10 years, probably, I'm thinking.
More than that.
But yeah, maybe it is more than that, you're right, probably so. But where those numbers came from, I don't know. Natalie could probably be able to have it in to explain that. If it's a best practice, is probably my assumption that she brought back from
You got 10+ years of
government
data,
financial
empirically, it appears.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, it's been working well for
I'll
us,
say that,
so.
yeah. And it might have been, it may be a standard like the Government Finance Officers Association meeting, where she had, I don't know, honestly. It's been the rule of thumb we've used, has been used effectively for us.
The Finance Governors Association recommendation on the fund balance authority is 25%. So I'm not saying we've had these discussions.
Right.
People know where I'm at. I'm not suggesting we drop it to there. I'm just saying that is the Fund Governors Association rule of thumb. Southern Pines is 25%. Ours is 30. That's good. but I think as we look at, and we did some of this on email, I think Dana and others who helped answer some of my questions, and running possible other scenarios. What we'll be adopting when we adopt our budget is actually a 1-year budget. What is our tax rate for that year? And what is our estimated expenditures for that year? Yeah. We utilize a 5-year plan for our own useful purposes so that we can sort of have a little bit of a view in the future. Yeah. But we can go back to other plans, and we had, we thought we're going to be up to 0.335 when I met. At one point we did. Yeah. It was a legitimate estimate. And then we came back and, and now we're reconfiguring it this way. At one time we were talking about having in the budget I think it was $4 million for the garage, the carriage house. We've moved that out. And we've now sort of moved up a little the public services complex, which is always further out. So these things change from time to time. I do think that the one thing I had not asked for calculation to sort of reconsider things is that the inflation adjusted rates that we're using that are on a cumulative rather than an average, 4-year average, rather than taking the cumulative of the 4 years. Because I think that would have an effect on some of our numbers.
Maybe I misunderstood what you were...
I thought we
in the 5-year projection, you mean? Or?
As we apply, when we were discussing where our inflation rate, right? Okay, we were using the 18% for this coming year.
Well, no, that was just for the CPI adjustment on the revenue neutral tax rate. What's built into this is it's actually a decreasing amount of anticipated inflation for each of these out years that compounds over time.
Where was it that we got to the 11%?
My understanding was just math on there, because you said it was 18% over 4 years. You take 18, divide that by 4, and you get 4.5.
That would be
4.5% per year.
Per year. So for the consideration of FY24, do we apply that 4.5% rate? That's exactly
No.
If you go back to the assumptions, I think did you include those in there, Dan?
And FY24, we're not applying it as kind of a blanket assumption to increase expenditures for inflation. Because FY24's expenditure budget is based on departmental requests that we review line by line in detail. Then from FY25 forward, we're taking FY24 expenditures and for operating and inflating it by a 4% CPI, and then I think that steps down to 3%, 2%, 2%.
Well, what do we compare the 4.5% number to versus the requests in our proposed budget? We're doing it going forward. I hear what you're saying. We're doing it going forward. I'm trying to understand the immediate budget in front of us.
It's not applied, it's not applied to it.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, and maybe this will add insight, but my understanding is that as you're developing the budget, okay, you're looking at it from the new. Granted, you can look at the old stuff, this is what we did, and we think there'll be an increase. But each department head says, this is what we need. But by the way, we're also not providing this service, okay, which we didn't provide before, so we needed an extra amount of money. Or we're no longer providing the service, so now we need less money than we had before.
Right.
And so that makes everything kind of adjust. And you come up with your thing and says, okay, we also have the new expense of cost, because providing this at the same thing now cost us, you know, the CPI increased. And then you come back with that saying, okay, so each individual line item has a CPI increase or whatever, to whatever they think it is, because some of that's going to be at 19% increase, some of it's going to be at 2% increase, because you have various folks who are offering stuff, you have increased supply, decreased demand, whatever the case is, and it's very dynamic.
We review it line by line of each department head, and there's no estimated CPI that's added, you know, comparing to last year's number for that same line.
And so
in some cases, you don't have that line from last year. In some cases, lines that were last year aren't in this year's budget. And in every case, we look at the number and we just say, does this make sense for this year?
It's also, under each of those line items, we're looking at the detailed listing of what is included in that line item. So, you know, fire department, it may be 12 turnout gear replacements, this many, this dollar for boots, this dollar for, you know, those hats.
So on the spreadsheet, you end up adding all that stuff up.
That's right.
To what we have here.
Yes.
And they say, yep, it's increased as to what we're going to do to provide the same services, plus we would have increased or decreased services there. And it may be an increase in 5% of the budget, maybe a decrease in 2% of the budget, whatever the case is, but you can justify saying it's more expensive because of inflation that's there. Am I missing something?
No, you got it.
Okay.
Jeff and Dana,
No, you go ahead.
in this process, the line by line, how much of the process does that take? Is it a month of the process? Is it 2 months of the process? I mean, my point is, it's a big part of this process, and you spend a lot of time going line by line. It's not done in a week.
No. Well, we do a week of meetings, so 4 days, over 4 days. This budget review committee binder, it has all those materials that we review over the course of that week.
But you've got staff
And
time
with
with
each-
each.
It takes the department heads like a month and a half to build that.
And that's what I'm talking about. This is not something that just, they spend a month and a half, and then it comes to your committee, and it's more time spent with it. So, and I'm saying what you're saying, that this is something that takes a lot of time to get to this. And
Another
this-
reason you can't compare Pinehurst to Southern Pines necessarily on what's going on, because different services are being applied and stuff like that.
Different services, but tax rates are tax rates. All right, let's go to one of the scenarios we ran, again, for 24. So I want to look at.
Yep.
What page are you on?
I'm on,
We're 170?
well, I guess I'm on 170, but I'm going back to some of the information that was provided in response to questions. If we went to if we, instead of, the proposal is 0.23 of our new tax rate for 2024, which will be which is what we have to take action on in June. If we change that rate to 0.22, we would still, the percentage of our total budget, the fund balance would still be, it would be at 65.7%, which is rather robust and healthy. And it would be, the operating margin would be at 0.86. So we would be a healthy, compared to our history, village.
If you're only looking at.
If I'm only looking at the year we're going to be voting on, okay. Now, going prospectively, and I agree with that approach. So, if you continue to look at, where's that? If you continue to look at that across the board, you would, for 25, 2 years out, we would still have a healthy percentage of our total budget and fund balance availability. It would be just over 40%. Once again, robust, even just a little above our 30 to 40% policy. And our operating margin would be 0.89, which is in your sweet spot there, 0.89. So what I'm saying is that what's immediately ahead of us, we have the opportunity to reduce the rate by a penny. And of course, next year, we can change it and increase it because we do this every year. We set that rate every year. These rates that we're projecting are sensible projections. But like the previous sensible projections that we've had from time to time, we come in and we look at numbers and requests and we say, hey, no, we may need to increase it or we may need to decrease it. The first budget we looked at last year, I guess, and initially it was going to be 0.315, and then staff came back and said, no, we don't need to increase it by that 0.05. They said, as a matter of fact, we can decrease it because, well, we looked at some more numbers and blah, blah, blah. So what I'm advocating is to take the 2024 one, which we're going to vote on, and drop that by 1 cent. That's what I want us to think about. I'm not here to have a vote right now. And I think going forward, as we look at some of the things that hit our budget planning in the out years, there were only 2 items that I would want to move a little further out of the horizon from beyond the 2028 so that we don't eliminate them, we just put them outside this immediate horizon, and then we would reconsider them next year because they would be in the new horizon. And that has to do with the $1 million towards the West Pinehurst Park designing and the Ladder and Quint fire truck purchase, which I think we were looking at in 26 or 27. Again, those are very out-year things.
It's scenario G, I believe is what you're
Yes.
referencing.
Yes, yes.
What scenario is it? C?
Scenario
G.
G.
D.
G, as in Greg.
So,
Everybody got that? It's the last page of the.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
the very
so-
last one.
now there are other scenarios. I was, the scenario D1 surprised me that the, right through the end of it,
D for dog?
yeah, D for dog, we were in excess of our, we were above the 30%.
Right, because we're removing 2.7 million of capital. So
Right,
that's going
like that one-
to improve the fund balance.
But that didn't, but even though when we removed that for, in scenario G, we start to drop below it.
Yeah.
In FY '26.
Yeah.
By,
By maintaining that 22-cent tax rate across the 5 years, we're losing $5 million of revenue over the course of those 5 years, compared to the proposed, yeah.
yes.
So that significantly affects the operating margin and the fund balance.
2 years out. We will have voted on 2 budgets before we have an impact there. So, again, I'm focusing on just this one in front of us is really the interest I have. And it goes to the fact that we're healthy, it's doable, and there's a heightened sensitivity, I think, among many of our residents about some expenditures in light of the property tax evaluation. When talking to residents, I find it's interesting that some of them will say, well, look, I expect my taxes to go up a little bit. They usually have a comment that I don't know if I'm going to get another 12% worse of government services, but nevertheless, I expect they're going to go up bigger. But then they'll drill down on a particular issue about the spending side. And they'll say, what about that? Watch what you spend. So, anyway, that's where I'm at with those 2 years in front of us, being healthy years at 22%, at 22 cents, excuse me.
So you're requesting to change it to 22%?
22 cents.
And sacrifice the truck and West Pinehurst Park?
I'm moving them out.
What's staff's
What's
response
the
to
difference?
this?
Well, what?
Well, we've got a lot of numbers. I wonder what staff's response to this, because we pushed Pinehurst Park out several times, and I believe there's a need to do some stuff there. I don't know what staff's response is to the fire truck. I don't know what staff's response is to this set of numbers and how, you know, John, you did a really good job on, at NSC the other day, explaining just the stability when you have this rate and not having the fluctuations. And so, will some of these scenarios cause us to find ourselves with more fluctuations? Or will some of these make us not provide services that the public wants or needs? Like I said, I've seen numbers, but I don't know how this will impact our operations, how it will meet demand of the public if there is demand. So I need more than just numbers. I need the stories. I need to hear staff's response to this.
Before we dive into that, because I agree with you on
I'm
that.
done.
I'm going to just be general, and my assessment is there is more fluctuation. Pat even talked about that, saying, okay, we can adjust it and increase the tax rate next year if we need to, because it's a 1 year at a time. I hear what you're saying. Ultimately, as I'm understanding the process that you mentioned, the process that John has mentioned, is that this is the kind of the last phase that we've had from a long process in developing this.
Sure.
Okay? I mean, that you look at the page 3, page 4 that talks about the process.
Yes.
Here they're on there. And having the fire truck in West Pinehurst Park, well, I know it's been moved to the right some, having it on there is a service that I personally think needs to remain on our long-term budget, because this is a process, we've talked about it before, and we have included this, okay? And it was this group included, the 5 of us, gave them directions on doing it. For us to now say we're going to drop down to 22 cents to move that off, I don't agree with that. Number one, I want those services to still be on the docket. And number two, I think in the process you're coming through here, it's very late, okay?
Okay, well, I'll answer your latter comment first. It's not late, because this is coming to the council for its decision. It's not late.
The decision will eliminate.
The work product is excellent, okay?
There's no question.
I mean, I developed lots of budget. This is the process that I've always gone through, and how budgets are developed. Scenarios are worked out, questions come back and forth. I'll remind you that last year, when we discussed the quint ladder truck, that was in our budget last year, we moved it further out.
Right.
Okay. And on the issue of the West Pinehurst Park issue, we also moved it further out. In that instance, we had some information from this community survey about priorities. And the one issue that the community survey agreed on, regardless of neighborhood, regardless of demographic, whether you only lived here 5 years or you lived here more than 20, is their lowest priority was additional athletic fields. Okay, and their third lowest priority was additional parks. We've had that property out there for 20 plus years. I'm saying at some time, it's probably going to be a wise thing to do something out there with it. But right now, to have it in our 5-year budget, and I think we have it in for 28.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
so if we moved it out to 29, I don't think that's the end of the world.
It's not the end of the world, there's no question.
No, I mean, it's just it's a budgetary movement.
Yeah, we're talking about a penny difference on the
We are.
tax rate, which comes out to about $5 million in total revenues that we end up having for the village. I understand that.
Yeah, okay.
I'm hearing you. And the one, you said a few things on there that I will totally agree with. And the biggest thing on there is I think this is a fantastic work product.
It is it's an excellent work product.
And I also think it not only is a good work product as it moves forward, it has captured what we have given as guidance to the staff, okay? And so they're following the guidance with that. And then the last part I'm going to bring up, which is really not necessarily captured in this, but it's a matter of being around this town, this village and the staff, everything else. We are being very good stewards of the taxpayer dollar in this village, in my opinion. Okay, you may disagree on, okay, we put in this versus putting in that. Okay, that's the disagreement. But the efficiencies and what we're seeing overall, I think have been excellent. Now, can we do better some places? And there's concerns I have, and when we're getting 25% of the revenue of the, or 25% of the total expenditures on the harness track, can we really increase it? Obviously, we're gonna have those conversations. But great work product, doing what we asked for, and it has the different things we've talked about in the past. I do not support dropping the penny on this one. Okay, I think we need to continue with what we have because it's responding to what we do there. Okay?
I agree with you on the great work product. Okay. I agree with you that it is reflective of a lot of issues that we've discussed. I also will add that we have fluctuated from time to time as to what we include, just like we have fluctuated with tax rates.
Perfect.
Okay, from the first time we met, you and I were newcomers, and that rate was up here. But that I don't, based on the numbers, I don't see why next year's budget, which we're going to be voting on, can't be dropped from the staff proposal of 0.23, 0.22. It does not impact either of our bottom lines for 2 years, not only for 24, but also for 25.
Okay, well, it's a stability factor we discussed before. There's a process. And as you decrease that on there, you increase the chances of having to raise the taxes up the following year because we understand it's a fluctuating process. And there's a buffer in this, I got you. The difference on there is going to be how much buffer is going to be in our coffers versus in our taxpayers' pockets. And I understand that, and I don't want to be overboard on this, so I'm taking too much. We're trying to find that sweet spot. That's the whole thing we're talking about. The sweet spot here, that I think is also important, is giving a stability across time for our taxpayers. Okay?
Well, let me suggest something, an additional alternative. What if we would take, we drop the tax rate to 0.22 for FY 24 and 25 for planning. We're only voting on 24 again, but for 24 and 25. And then in 26, 27, and 28, we put it up to 0.23. I hadn't asked for this before, Dana, because it didn't dawn on me literally until yesterday as I was going over the numbers. And to see if that makes up the difference that Dr. Morgan is now pointing out.
You have to get to a tax rate of 0.24 by FY 28, or actually by FY 27, or we have operating margin problem.
Well, that's what I'm saying is I'm suggesting to raise it to 0.23 for 26, but taking out West Pinehurst Park in the fire truck.
Can I jump in here?
Yeah.
A lot of good discussion. You're correct in pointing out that this is going to change in the future, and that years 1 or 2 through 5 are just planned. But the plan now tells us that we have to get to a tax rate of 0.24 by FY 27.
Okay.
And operating margin, you can talk about capital all day long. You can pull big pieces out of capital, but it doesn't change your operating problem.
Right.
We have laid out a very strong case for why the tax rate, a very strong justification for why the tax rate can and should change going from FY 23 to FY 24. It's based on facts and gets us on a path that again is based on facts for changes in tax rates in future years. I'm focused on FY 26, right? That gets us to the 0.24 that we need in 2027 and 28. I would, in those out years, I would much rather be in a position to go to the public and say, you know what, we found operating efficiencies and we can cut the tax rate by a penny, than conversely going to the public in the out years and saying, we need to increase the tax rate, but I can't really justify why because nothing's changed in our operating environment.
Great point.
Now, couple comments. And Lydia made a point a little while ago, what's the staff's view, but what's the impact here? The impact here is $600,000. So how would we, what would we now do with $600,000 less?
FY '24.
For the,
In 24,
for
yes.
the next year, FY '24. How would we manage that? What would get cut? What would not be funded in the next fiscal year? I doubt you can answer that right now, but you all, the team, may have an idea about that. While you're cogitating on that, just for a second, that's point one for me. Pat, point two for me is your orientation is to the taxpayers and the residents of the village of Pinehurst, I think, on this. Because they're gonna see a tax increase due to the evaluation no matter what. I mean, maybe some, we've already talked that through. So you're suggesting that we, the village, in I would just say, trying to do the best things for our taxpayers, trying to honoring the fact that they are going to receive an increased tax total dollar value when that gets run by, that is an objective that is appropriate for village council to consider in looking at the total budget and the tax rate in this particular way, right?
Yes.
It's an orientation to how do the residents, what can we do for the residents that we haven't already tried to do by creating a very robust and fair budget? What can we do even more tangibly, I guess I would say, in reducing the tax rate further so that their tax bill is lessened in this environment? That's it?
That's pretty much it.
Okay.
But, go ahead.
Well, I was just, to that point, the difference between a 23-cent and a 22-cent on the average home of $514,000 is $51.
Okay.
Say,
For the year,
for the year.
so $4 a month.
Well,
It's the average.
that fits the average model, but it's going to fluctuate.
Yeah, for
Right. All right, so if we have $600,000 less in the budget, what are we not doing? What would we not do?
I mean, I think Pat is suggesting we.
Pat's point, for these next two, well, for this coming year, that's $600,000 that we're not putting in fund balance to fund future projects.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because we have the line-by-line budget that
Yeah.
we expect they will have.
You either have to make it up in a higher tax rate of the future year, or we debt finance more.
Or there are
Or
additional
reduce the
revenues
capital stuff.
or there could be, we're gonna be living through the US Open. We don't know how much more we're gonna get in revenue really from the sales
Well,
tax.
but we made an assumption, and we should be careful not to
I'm
overfit
agreeing.
our assumption in order to
The
achieve.
future is
Especially
general
for a
tax rates.
one-time influx.
What did you say, Jeff, about we made an
Maybe you were
assumption?
gonna- What's your comment, please? You were-
No, I'm sorry, just in reference to the US Open, potential additional revenues. I would be hesitant to rely on a one-time
Absolutely.
influx
I'm just saying
like
it's
that
one,
in this planning process.
it's just one of those.
Our previous year's experience shows that it's not a windfall.
Well, and John,
Yeah, that's
It's a
absolutely right.
plus up, but it's not a
We
windfall.
get a bump, but it's not a windfall.
Yeah.
John,
What
remember,
if, I'm just making this up now, what if COVID-62 arrives in October? And there is no US Open.
Right.
Right.
Right?
These things can happen, right?
And that's what we make it, that's why budgets are an annual exercise.
Good point.
We can't bind future councils to anything, and we're not bound by previous councils' things. It's a one-year budget.
What if we're 1 year away from a major recession and sales taxes tank?
That's another thing. Then we have
We're
to
more
address
reliant-
that.
Then we're more reliant on those.
For tax dollars.
And then we could make a good argument if we had to raise taxes in that situation.
I don't know, 'cause that's when they're hurting the most.
Well,
One thing Janine told us.
It's never a good time to argue. Go ahead.
One thing Janine told us at the Women's Exchange, which is important for everybody here, is they are going to sell fewer tickets for 2024 than they did in prior years because they want the visitors to have a better experience when they come from. So whether they continue, whether they're really going to do that, and I don't know the number, but that's going to impact what we're going to be bringing in.
Yeah, it's still being open, but.
Yeah.
Well, being open, but it will not have the population.
Not as many people here buying things.
So a penny decrease, it's not gonna change the expenditure side of our budget.
Right.
Correct.
For this.
For this year.
For this next year,
For this next
And
year.
the follow-on, if we don't, if there's an increase possible,
When we get out
we
far,
need to increase.
Yeah, there'll be regular increases.
Downstream there is. And I rolled that out of adjusting from the 26 and 27 and 28. From a planning standpoint, adjust that to an increase from 22 to 23.
23 won't do it.
I understand, I'm just saying, it's a planning purpose, I'm looking to see what would the numbers look like, that's all. I don't need the answer right now, but,
Well, we know what the numbers will look like with regard to operating margin
Yeah.
with a 23-cent tax rate and 27, 28. You have that in the analysis.
well, the operating margin will be, no, the fund balance authority will be,
Fund balance would be a different answer, but.
But it'd be
the
fine.
operating
That's
margin,
a-
we
yeah.
have that data. It's-
yeah, and the operating margin is in, I think it's at 92 rather than 91, or 93 rather than, I closed my book, but,
It's at 90,
look,
no, that's at 23.
Yeah,
Oh,
doing
yeah.
23 is,
Maybe the page before it.
yeah.
So scenario G, the operating margin is 25.
It's 94.
29.
94, okay.
That's
Yeah.
not acceptable.
Yeah.
What's that?
That's not acceptable.
Well,
Which scenario are you looking at, Jeff?
Sorry?
D?
G, golf.
In 26, it's 0.94, but in 25,
well, I'm gonna agree,
it's 0.89.
I'm gonna agree with you.
No, I'm not talking about, I'm actually
Yeah,
talking
you're
about.
looking at D right there.
I agree with you, Jeff, and if it's not acceptable in 96,
D,
Delta.
C, D, they both have 23. B, C, and D all have 23.
and I'm gonna agree with you, if it's not acceptable in 26.
7 and 8.
Or 7 and 8.
Yeah.
Well, in 2 years from now, we would make an adjustment.
But are you okay with
Which
presenting
way?
a plan?
Probably, we may have to increase unless, who knows what happens.
I don't think that's a necessary change we have to do. I think you're putting it as increased risk to have to raise the taxes later
Yeah.
on. And I think that the buffer in there we have on this is a small buffer overall, but it protects the village. I think the best interest of the village is we accept the stuff we have here and move on with this budget.
No, I think we need to discuss it more because of the overlapping of the property tax evaluation adjustment and hike at the simultaneous time that we're discussing setting our tax rate. That's why this is, I think, attention is focused on this more than at any other time. If we weren't in the middle of a property evaluation right now, there'd be less attention to what we're thinking of spending money on and what that tax rate is.
I won't disagree with your logic on there. I think that logic, that the time to think about it is certainly there. But we've already gone through the process of trying to maintain a budget neutral tax rate. We decreased that.
And-
We've addressed it.
And for FY 24 and 25, by dropping the tax rate to 0.22, we are healthy in both the considerations of the fund balance authority and our operating margin.
And you
Based
put us
historically.
at bigger risk for having to raise the taxes to provide the services we're talking about.
Is there
For
any?
You're increasing the risk to raise those taxes.
Perhaps.
That's what you're doing.
Perhaps.
I'd like to,
Hang on, Jeff, please, and then I think Jamie had a comment.
so, what
Well,
Pat's is advocating for here with regard to capital is not the elimination of a ladder truck and elimination of development of West Pine Park.
No.
It's to push it out, right? Okay, we already have fire station number 3 in the out years.
Yes.
And we're starting, and this projection has us starting at 30% in 28
30% of
fund balance.
fund balance, yes.
Which means we don't have the capital to do those projects in the out years.
And this rate gives us.
What would, yeah, what's missing, if anything, from these scenarios, A and G, and G we're looking at D, on that point you're just making, how this all affects us going out into the future? Is there some additional display that we might want to have and come back tomorrow and look at that? Or is this showing us, Jeff, your concerns? Is there some other concern you have that if we made the change to 22 cents for fiscal 24, how that's going to affect us going out?
It depends on what you're asking to look at. It's not clear to me what.
I just want to make sure that your feelings about the effect of going to 22 cents this year and potentially next fiscal year, okay? What happens to us going out into the future on the fund balance position and the ability to do any of these two other projects, the flag truck and the
right. So
is there something else you want?
My two primary concerns are, first, tax rate. You have to get, based on the plan that we have built and the assumptions that are built into this model, you have to get to a 24-cent tax rate by 27 in order to be positioned to handle our operating expenses. So that's one. So that means the 5-year plan has to get us there somehow based on some justification, right? The second is, if you fund a decrease to 22 cents in 24 and 25 by removing the ladder truck in West Pinehurst Park from the 5-year plan, that doesn't eliminate the requirement. It's just farther out in future years.
Sure.
And this plan, with that modification, if you drop the tax rate and then grow back to 24, yeah, we can make it look good in FY 28 with regard to the parameters, as long as you can get the tax rate up to 24. But you're left with those two new additional capital expenses that you just said, well, we're just going to push them out to 29 and 30, right? We won't be in a position to do them then, because we won't have the fund balance to take it on.
Yeah, and that doesn't show on here.
Right.
Correct. That's the point I'm trying to get. Would council like to sort of see that flow?
You can't see the impact of that second one because it's in the out years.
Well, we could bump our display here a little bit further, I guess.
Well,
so we need to come back tomorrow anyway, Mike, is that correct?
Unless we finish today.
Excuse me?
I said unless we finish today, and I'm very comfortable with the plan that staff has been almost a year on.
Well, is there more than just this decision that has to be made, or any other that would bring us back tomorrow? We've gotten.
Yeah, we're done.
Yeah.
Okay.
Tax rate.
I'm gonna suggest that I'm sticking with the plan as it is here, the 23-cent rate. I believe that the consistency of that and the change and the modification of variations that might result in the 22 cents, I'm not willing to live with it right now. I think we have the capacity to do it, but I'm not willing to take that route at this time. I think this is reflective of a responsible budget with a look to the future that will be consistent and create less certainty in the future, less uncertainty in the future than we would if we changed that rate today.
I still believe we can function comfortably in the next 2 years with a penny drop in that rate. As a matter of fact, I know that because of what they produced in the spreadsheet. But I do think that
my worry is out into the future.
The three of us are comfortable with this.
Yes, I guess that's true.
Well, and then I would like to throw something else in. This is the tax reval year. And the tax reval, if you look at tax revals in the past, they've gone up, 1 or 2%, or down 1 year actually, or down. But this year, all of a sudden, we're at 49% for crying out loud. And that's a big jump. And it was disproportionate. The ones that went up the most, as best I understand it, and I haven't seen any actual numbers, this is just a conversation with the tax guy, are the condos and the more modest homes, okay, went up disproportionately high compared to
Makes sense in a tight market.
more expensive homes and commercial. So if we were to, in this first year, which is 2024, keep it at 22 cents, that would have the most impact on the property taxpayers who would probably appreciate it the most.
But how much are we talking?
And I think that's
We're talking about
You're talking about
$30.
$30.
Yeah.
Talking about $2 a month.
So,
But that's not,
I mean, I don't think $24, saving somebody with a $200,000 home, saving $24 is gonna make or break their livelihood.
no, but I don't think if you tell them if we don't do that, we might not have enough fund balance in 4 years or 5 years to design the West Montrose Park. If you present that to the residents, I think you're gonna have a different response. Look, I'm being rude by packing and getting to go because I do have lunch, so I apologize for that. If there's gonna be a continuation of this discussion tomorrow, let me know and I will be here. If not, we'll continue the discussion at our council meeting. Do we have a council meeting? Yes, we have a council meeting
Oh, we have a
Tuesday.
hearing.
And a budget hearing on this.
May
Very good.
23rd.
Okay, I thank everybody, particularly staff work. I'll give special call out to Dana because
Is there
those spreadsheets.
I'm not
are-
hearing any reason that we need to meet tomorrow if the majority of the council, which approves the budget as it is, carries. I believe that's where we are.
Yes.
So unless the staff have other things related to the budget that we need to hear and achieve and learn about, I guess we do not need to meet tomorrow. Is that, Mr. Sanborn, would you feel that's fair? All right.
As long as there are no questions on the capital improvement
Correct.
plan, then that's the only section that we did not cover.
Jeff Morgan, any?
We'll hear from the public on Tuesday night, right? So.
Yes, well.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. We from.
Might change your
Yes,
perspective, I
If
think.
you choose. At that point.
I'm sorry?
All
So
right,
you still have
so
another-
we don't need to meet
Yeah.
tomorrow.
Pass that.
Next discussion is that we have the regular meeting next Tuesday evening. That's going to be a busy meeting, I'm sure, as all, but we have a lot on the agenda already, I think, and not just the budget. It's good. Okay. Thank you all very much. Do you have anything?
Motion to adjourn. You need to make a motion, or somebody.
I move to adjourn the work session.
That's a motion by Lydia Bosch. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Jeff Morgan. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Carries by 4 to 0. Thank you all very
Kelly
much.
was.